Hey, John, microphone's off.
Let's try that. Is that working?
Let's see. How come I don't hear you?
Okay.
There we go. That's some pretty impressive pictures you sent.
I thought you'd like to see what I have in mind
Yeah,
just as a start for this. I don't know again how long you want me
that's
to go
wild.
on, but I'll do what I have to.
Yep.
Just let me know how you want to handle questions if there are any.
Well, that's up to you. I mean, it's basically just, you want people to interrupt you or you want them to wait until the end.
Well, I'm covering a period of time that goes from 1960
Hmm.
up to about, I don't know, 2010. That's quite a few decades. So if there's something that can't wait, the better they ask me while I remember what to say.
While you're in that era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hit 80 on December 31st and
Wow.
starting to feel it.
Well, I don't know, John. I'm still a year shy of 70, and I've been stuck at home for several months now with one ailment or another. So I've been feeling it for a couple of years. You're in good shape if you're just starting to feel it now.
Yeah, you know what it is? When I was setting these machines up, especially the consoles at the other end, I had to get down on the floor and put wires on and look at stuff. And boy, my knees and my
Oh,
legs are just, I don't remember ever having that before.
that's what
So
kids and apprentices are for, no?
yeah, let me.
Uh, so I just let you in, and I saw you sitting there. I'll let everybody in a couple of minutes, and we can start the festivities. But I'll
Nancy was watching it and said it looked great. She's out front. So,
um, I don't see her on the screen here.
oh no, she's just watching at her office.
Okay.
I think she's logged on YouTube or
Okay.
something. I
Well,
don't know. I don't know if she's using Zoom or not.
okay. I
Yeah,
got to catch up with you at some point. Your point is well taken. We're both getting to the point here where something's going to give. Um, I got a Betacam machine and an EIAJ machine, and I think and a Umatic machine. Um, I'd love if you could triage them and let me know what I got to do to get them working again.
yeah. Well, I can do my best for you. The
Yeah.
problem we're going to run into is that parts are getting more and more
Yeah.
unobtainium as we go.
Yeah. Well, they're either
So
going to need a tune up or they're dead. That's
yeah.
pretty much where I'm
Well,
at now.
maybe a good scrubbing down and calibration and just checking them and see. But sure, be happy to help you with that.
Yeah. And if I mean, I'm basically a capacitor changer. I'm a glorified capacitor
Well,
changer.
that's what really goes wrong with a lot of this
If
stuff.
if they need more than that, are you still open for service?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Well, one
Yeah.
way or the other, we'll get them
I
get
mean,
them
I used to
cooking.
have I used to have a wall full of parts for this stuff,
Yeah.
but the problem is, when I moved out of that big building in Booton, a lot of that stuff got thrown in these trailers here, and
Yeah.
uh, my crew, they don't know what this stuff is, and they just. I went out there the other day to look at machines. I was trying to get the console Ampex and IBC in here, and I couldn't move them. They've got them so jammed in. So I'll be talking about them, but I won't show them. Maybe
Yeah.
sometime in the future, if I can get them in here, I'll explain them.
You got photos?
Um, no.
Yeah. Well, we do what we can.
Well, there's 20 machines here.
Hmm.
Nancy came in before and counted them all.
Let's
And
see. That's 20 more 1-inch machines than I or most people have. So,
yeah, that's right. Just 1 inch. And these are not all the ones I have, but
mm,
they're probably the most typical of various various improvements of things that happened.
mm.
So
Yeah. I don't know if you saw the picture I put on. I don't know if you're on that the video dinosaurs. Facebook page. Somebody gave me a 2-inch video splicing machine a couple of months ago. I'm
You got
looking
the
at that
microscope
going,
on it?
boy, Lord, how have we evolved?
Yeah, you have the microscope on it?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to find one of those. I got the splicers, but not the editors.
Mm.
I got a pair of those splicers, but I have never found one that had the microscope on it.
I'll bring it with me when I
No.
come over. Let's see it.
Love to see that.
But all right, well, let me start letting people in here because I know people are champing at the bit. So here we go. Oh, there's Nancy waiting to get in.
Hi, everyone.
Evening to it.
Hello, everybody. Larry, I see you're there.
I'm letting everybody in. It seems our admit all button didn't show up tonight. There's always something.
Yeah.
Good evening, Steve.
Good evening. How are you tonight?
Well, pretty good for an old guy.
Right. Tell me about it.
By the way, did you get my email?
I did. I haven't had a chance to respond to you. I would, yeah, I'd be happy to look at it.
That'd be fine. No rush, no problem.
Okay.
I've got a guy coming Monday or
Okay.
Tuesday there do another interview with me. But anyway,
Okay.
it's on. Just Google my name on. Just Google and say and early television after my name. You'll get to see it and view it and tell me what you think.
Oh, okay.
It may or may not be acceptable, but there's a lot of content. You always have
Right.
these, I wish I could have said this, could have done that, but he said, we'll make an update on it.
Of course. Yeah, I'll take a look at it in the next couple of days.
That's fine. Thank you, Steve.
Well, I think we'll wait till 5 after, like we usually do, before we start. Give latecomers a chance to get on.
Hey, Steve,
Yeah.
I'll just tell you quick. I do have a call into Thomas Electronics about rebuilding CRT, and I'm waiting for a call back.
Okay. Sounds great.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, hope something comes of it.
It's just that I have 4 buildings that I've got stuff in, and trying to do it all in a segment while we're on the air would be difficult. So I thought
Right.
if I did something and condense it and just do a video, maybe that'll work
Right.
better.
Yeah. And if that doesn't work by itself, maybe what we can do is take portions of the videos, make a few segments.
And that's probably
live in between.
a better idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of it may not interest you. It's an hour and 4 minutes long, so you
Right. Well,
do edit it as you see fit. Yeah.
nothing wrong with an hour and 4 minutes. We
Yeah.
I think there'll be a lot of interest in it.
But there's something in it for everybody.
Good.
What was just discussed? Excuse me, I just joined.
Julian was talking about his he's going to do a presentation for one of these meetings, and we were talking about the logistics of using some video that he's put together, because his stuff is scattered over 4 different buildings. It'd be sort of hard to do it live.
What would be the subject matter of the video?
Television.
As in history of, or what aspect?
Hour and 4 minutes of it. There's something in there for everybody. Mostly my collection.
When does that start, if I may, in terms of what year the sets?
Oh, it was done about 2 months ago. I had a guy from a videographer come up from Atlanta, and he calls it a stereo niche. But if you Google my name, Julian Burke, and early television, you can see it on Google right there. Or it's actually a YouTube production as well. But anyway, I thought we'd save it. Steve is wanting to do something, but I've got a lot of stuff in 4 different buildings, and it would be very difficult to try and do a presentation in an hour. And, you can't drive to all these places, and you have to do something. So,
What year is the earliest television in your collection that would be in this video?
I think I've got a 1929 Telehor. It's a scanning disc. I've got a lot of mostly early television cameras. Geez, I don't know. We covered a lot of stuff, and I can't remember everything, but we covered stuff. But there's always, after I watched it, and I thought, geez, I wish I'd shown this, wish I'd shown that, wish I'd said this or said that. But it was just kind of an off the cuff thing there. And he's edited about 4 hours of interview there into an hour and 4 minutes. But anyway, I thought that might suffice. But Steve can watch it and edit it, or take out portions of it, stuff that'd be of more interest. But I like my early studio cameras and some early sets. There's just so much stuff that I've got. I've got about 12,000 square feet in 4 buildings.
Do you have any sets that would be in the video that are like from the late 1930s with cathode ray tubes?
The earliest one I think I have some tubes and stuff. I don't actually have a pre-war set. I've been wanting to get one, but the only thing I have a scanning disc with some extra discs, and I have a color wheel, from the early 50s. But I had a chance to get a TRK-12 one time, and I don't know what happened. It just, he sold it on me or something. I almost had it. It came out of the Gusdorf up in Chicago, had it, a real nice one, and I missed out on it.
Let's go ahead and get started with the
Sure.
meeting. We can talk more about this in the general discussion part. Welcome everybody to the January meeting of the Early Television Museum Society. We've been doing this for months now, and we still have a pretty good attendance. I want to thank the New Jersey Antique Radio Club for sponsoring the meeting and providing the Zoom feed for us. Dave, why don't you give your little spiel on being nice?
Yeah, just as usual. John's put a lot of work into this presentation. Just be respectful. Keep your microphones off unless you have a question to ask. If you do have a question that pertains to what he's talking about, you can politely interrupt, and there'll be plenty of time at the end for general discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Let me give a brief update on the museum. What's been happening in the last, it's been 2 months since we didn't have a meeting last month, but we had our membership drive starting the first for 2024 membership starting end of the 1st of December. And we're already up to 155 members, which is substantially more than last year. But I would urge you, well, we still have about 60 people who were members last year that haven't renewed yet. So if you're one of those, please renew. And if you're not, if you're new to the museum or haven't been a member in some time or never been a member, urge you to join. It's a major source of funding for the museum. Keeps us going. The other big thing that's going on is the planning has started for the convention. It's the first weekend in May, like it usually is. I think May 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Format is very similar to what we've had in past years. We're making some changes in the schedule to deal with some of the issues we had last time, but it'll have the same basic elements. We'll have presentations, we'll have social gathering on Friday night, we'll have a silent auction and a live auction, a dinner Saturday night, and it'll be a good time. I suspect we will have good attendance, generally do. You'll be getting an email pretty soon from us about how to register if you're interested in registering. And if you have any questions about it, ask. Final thing I wanted to mention is that we've had, most of you knew Cliff Benham, who is the world's expert on color wheel sets. He's a wonderful guy. He did lots for the museum. Most of the, in fact, all of our scanning, our color wheel sets were either put together or repaired or got going by Cliff. Unfortunately, he died recently, but he was nice enough to leave some of his stuff to the museum. Nick Williams delivered some of it a few weeks ago. The most exciting thing in that batch of stuff is a 1950 or 51 Crosley color wheel set, a complete set, not just the color wheel assembly, but a complete factory-made set. Only one that exists. We have the wheel mechanism from one, but in fact, we didn't even know Cliff had that. We are. He also brought a working color tell. Oh, and I think probably knowing Cliff, probably that Crosley works. It's probably been restored. So when I get back in Columbus, that'll be one of my first things to get it going and put it on display. But he also gave us a nice color tell and some collection of color wheels. And there's some more stuff coming. I'm not sure what, but we're really grateful to have gotten that stuff. So those are the highlights of what's going on at the museum. Attendance is still good. No major issues. Anybody have any questions or comments about what I've just gone over?
Steve, do you have any information on what presentations are going to be held yet?
No, I should mention that we have a couple of ideas. There's a guy here in Ohio who is in his early 90s, but apparently I haven't talked to him yet, but he's apparently very sharp. And he was involved in the early days of mechanical TV. And we may ask him to make a presentation. We have a couple of others that are we've heard about. We don't have much detail yet, but so no decision has been made. If you have ideas, you know somebody who would make a good presentation, please let me know.
Well, I'm in San Francisco, and I sure wish I could talk John Staples into coming over there, but so far I've not had any luck.
Right. Well, keep working. Any other comments, questions?
Well, just one statement might be is that for your conference there, would you consider people making remote presentations over Zoom?
I think we would, yeah. If somebody had a good presentation and was unable to attend, we could certainly do that. Well, let's move on. Is there anybody that's watching us that has never been on a meeting before? Like to tell us about yourself? Let us know who you are. Well, it sounds like we're all old timers with it then. But let me move on to the item that we're going to be covering. Actually, it's two items from the museum. We're going to be talking about a couple of Hollis Baird items today. Hollis Baird, as most of you, he's no relation to John Logie Baird. He was an American from Boston. His company was Shortwave and Television, and he was one of the earlier pioneers in mechanical TV. And we have a couple of items in our collection that are from him. We have several things, as a matter of fact, but what we're going to talk about here first is the receiver that we have. Larry, go over to the Model 2526 receiver. That's the scanner. Receiver is underneath it. There you go. Now, Hollis Baird made this. Nobody knows what quantities he made, but he was fairly prominent. I don't know if he was, compared to Jenkins, how many sets he sold. It seems like there are just about as many Hollis Baird sets surviving as there are Jenkins. So my guess is that he made a similar quantity. This is the Model 25 shortwave receiver. It's designed specifically for television. It tuned the new at the time shortwave band for television, around 2.1 megahertz. I think there were three channels around 2.1, and there's another channel up at 2.7 megahertz. They were 100 kilohertz wide, which was a big improvement for mechanical TV. Previous broadcasting had been done on the broadcast band or over shortwave radio, and it very much limited the resolution that was possible. So this was for the shortwave band. They sold it as a factory-made item, which is the Model 25, or as a kit, which is the Model 26. No way of telling which one this is. Could be either. I think the factory and the kit ones looked identical when they were put together. And there are a few of these that survive today, not a huge number. Now let's go on to the other item right on top, Larry, is the Model 35 and 36 drum scanner. Now, this was a companion piece that went with the receiver. And as you probably know, most mechanical sets from that era used a scanning disc, a round disc of 18 inches in diameter with a series of holes punched in it, and the neon sat behind it. Well, this was an innovation that replaced the disc with a drum. And that drum is about an inch and a half high, I guess, metal, and it has a series of holes punched in the side of it. And it spins around, and that creates the scanning. One of the advantages of it is that if you've ever seen the picture on a Helical disc mechanical set, it's sort of it's trapezoidal. The picture is not square. This approach creates a perfectly square picture. Now ours is missing its there right on the where there's four, right where that hole is in the middle of it in the front. There are four holes in the wood, and that was to hold a viewing hood and then a lens. Ours is missing. The guy that donated to us was from California, and he had no idea where it was. We have information from other sets to make a replica. We just haven't gotten around to doing it. Eventually, we hope to do that. And there's no reason why this couldn't be made to work. Another interesting inside here, there is a power supply for the neon. Don't think you can see it, but there's a circuit board in the bottom with a rectifier tube to provide the about 300 volts for the neon. The neon, of course, is inside the drum. Actually, it sticks up through the bottom of the drum. The bottom of the drum is open. And there's also a synchronizing amplifier. This set uses the phonic wheel approach to synchronizing, where a small amount, where the video signal is taken and filtered very crudely and fed to a series of coils that exert force on this is a 60-line system on a 60-tooth wheel. And as it did this, it would slow the motor, the main motor, down in order to keep the picture in synchronization. That's how the Baird televisor works. And that's the approach that they took here. But this has a separate amplifier inside it for that purpose. I have not looked at the schematic of it. The Baird system does nothing other than put a capacitor across the video to kill the very high frequencies, and leaving mainly information at the line rate. And I don't know if they do anything more sophisticated in this set or not. So that's pretty interesting. You know, as you probably know, there were all kinds of approaches to doing scanning, and the Helical disc was the most common. Probably the second most common was the lens disc, which used the same principle disc with lenses embedded in it in a point light source. But there were also mirror drum systems that had a series of drums, of mirrors mounted on a drum. There was a system that used a spiral of metal pieces that and created a picture. In fact, we have at the museum, we have in our color section. Some time ago, I thought it would be fun to take one of these. They're called mirror screws. Take one of these mirror screws and build a color light source for it. So you can actually watch it. If you come to the museum, you can watch the watch color on a 1929 machine, essentially. And it works. It's not great, but it's, you know, nothing was very great back there. So that's the stuff we're going to cover. Anybody have any comments, want to add anything, or have any questions?
Yes, Steve. I have one question, or actually a couple of questions for you about this thing. One, how widely were the Hollis Baird television products distributed? Were they local, regional, or national?
Well, they advertised nationally. So I think, and this one is, you know, this one's from California, and I found several of them exist in California. So I think they were sold all over the country.
Steve, it was
now they were headquartered. They were in Boston, but you know, I've seen them from everywhere.
It was the Kresge chain of 5 and 10 department stores that sold them. So that would have been national.
Do we know what these cost in 1929?
Hold on, let me see if
I remember a number like $39 when they were trying.
Yeah, something like that. They were, now that was a fair amount of money back then, but
Yeah.
we have the prices on most of the sets that we have in the collection. I just don't remember, but it was in that under $50.
Oh,
How many stations broadcast in his format?
Well, his format was the same, was the 60 line format. It was the same format as the disc sets used. And that became sort of the standard after 1930. You know, everybody played around with 24, 45, 48, and so forth. And everybody except for Western Television went to 60 lines right before the end of the mechanical era in the early 30s. And they all used the same. They use different synchronization methods, but the same frame rate and so forth.
Also, Steve Baird had his own station in Boston. So he would use his own format, and if you were buying them locally, that was the only one you could use.
Yeah, really? I didn't know that. Yeah.
I'm picturing a station using a scanning disc and somebody with a scanning drum receiver getting pictures like Jay Leno's chin.
You know, I've never seen a picture on the scanning drum. You know, it's interesting. Its format is one difference is that I've noticed is that the Hollis Baird standard was 1-to-1 horizontal to vertical, whereas RCA, for instance, in the RCA set we have, it's I think 5-to-4 or something like that. It's slightly wider than it is high. So you'd see different things on that set as compared to a scanning disc set. Of course, you couldn't see much anyway, so I'm not sure it made much difference.
I think when you were earlier mentioning how much did the TV cost, I think the $39 was more for the scanner itself. That didn't include the receiver.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And prior to the 2 megahertz band, you know, people use just regular radio receivers with some modifications to tweak the bandwidth a little bit, AM radio receivers. But when the 2 megahertz band came along, they needed 100 kilohertz of bandwidth. So they had to go to custom made, sets for television.
Steve, they also made 2 receivers other than that one. One was a little cathedral shaped unit. And then there's a bigger one that's more like the big Philco cathedrals. I have one of those, and I'd never seen another one. I think that's like a JD30 or something like that.
Yeah, right.
I can get you a picture of that sometime.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I think we may have it on our site now. We have one of the cathedral thing is was actually they call it a converter. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
What its output was? Did it have circuits for driving a neon or not?
I think it might have just been to get the shortwave frequencies onto a regular AM radio, and then you would have had to work from that point.
That's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah. There's a note in chat.
Any other comments, questions?
One thing I remember about Baird's business, and it seems to be located in Fenway Park. If you look up the address on all of his advertisements, it's the address of Fenway Park. And there are a number of spaces, underneath the stadium that are businesses, or there used to be before the baseball took them all over. But I thought that must have been interesting.
Crowd.
Yeah, yes. And I think one of his published pieces had a photo of, was pretty recognizably Fenway Park with a big pair of antennas and wire strung between them.
Yeah.
That must have been interesting.
Yeah, right.
I also have, I got a few months ago, a scanning drum like that. Looks a lot like his. There's no name on it, but it has the individual lens in each hole. And I didn't,
Really?
yeah,
Huh.
I'll send you a picture of that too,
Love
and
that.
a similar motor. And, but I don't know if it was, I got it from an antique dealer who mostly does radio, so he didn't know anything about it either. But
Oh,
maybe you'd recognize something about it.
yeah, I've never heard of that. It is fascinating. You'd have to, if you have the same motor, you'd have to have a screen, which I think you could easily put on a
Yeah,
set
no
like that.
no cabinet at all, just the wheel and the
Right,
motor.
just the wheel. Yeah, I'd love to see that. Well, why don't we move on to the main event? John Turner is back to talk about 1-inch videotape systems. His presentation before was fascinating, and I'm sure this one will be equally fascinating. So let me turn it over to you, John.
Dave, can you unmute me?
I cannot, but you are not muted. You're good.
I have, yeah, but I'm pushing the button down. I gotta hold this space bar. So is there a way
Oh.
for me to?
Yeah, there should be a little icon, a little microphone icon on your screen there.
Okay, check.
You're good.
Okay. All right. These 1-inch machines started out when they sort of grew up with me in the broadcast business. One of the very first jobs I ever had in the field was in the mid 60s, putting in RF systems, both broadband and microwave. And as part of all that, we wound up getting involved with cable companies and corporations and occasionally a broadcaster. But these machines that I'm going to show you represent stuff that happened starting in the early 60s and went up to the end of it when cassette decks took over. So let me turn this rig around and I'll start with the first one. Okay, here. And I won't do what I did with the quads. Everything's in one place right now. So this should make it pretty easy. Okay, so the first machine I've got to show you is this Norelco that's here. This machine came out in the early 60s. It's hybrid. It's half vacuum tube and half solid state. This is the brochure that they put out, the operating manual for the machine. It has a couple interesting features. The one that I like the most is that if you pull, it's a single head machine. There's no flying erase head. It won't edit. It's black and white. But the head comes right out, which is very unusual for these machines. You just pull it back from the mount and you can replace it in a minute. That was pretty clever. And I'm going to show you a format a little later that I think they copied this, although they claim it, they invented it. All right, so that's the Norelco hybrid machine. And we'll move on here to the next one. This guy is a machine that was developed by Victor Company of Japan. And this is before they were JVC. And it was sold in the United States. Okay. It was sold in the United States by Craig and by Diamond Power. It's a 1-inch machine. It has 2 heads. The Norelco, by the way, only has 1 head. And it should be obvious that if you have a 1-head machine scanning magnetic tape, there's going to be a period of time when the head and tape are not touching each other. And what the Norelco machine did, which was very clever, was they had a circuit that measured noise. And when the noise of the head leaving the tape exceeded a certain value, they would put a clamp pulse on the video, which was great because then there was no vertical jitter in the picture. This guy's a 2-head machine, and we've used it a few times. It actually works pretty good. The only thing we've had to happen to it is replace the rubber. We had Terry make us some new rollers for it, but it's quite nicely designed on the, which is unusual for these machines. All of the electronics are sitting down here on plug-in cards. It's very easy to fix. The case is wood. A lot of these early machines were made out of wood. All right, let's go on and take a look at the next one. And now it's good for an hour. There was a color adapter that went with this machine, but it barely, I don't know why they even bothered with it, because it barely worked. The bandwidth of these machines, in a good day, maybe you'd hit 2.5 to 3 megahertz. So there's no way you're going to record color on them, not without some processing. Okay, so the next one is this guy. This is Panasonic built a family of these machines. It's also a two-head design. The circuitry is not as convenient to get to as the Victor machine was. It made a pretty good picture. There was a later version of this. Is the original one that was sold in the US. It's called the NV204. The later machine, which was called an NV505, actually had a high band capability and recorded color. Wasn't bad, wasn't good. Now, this one also is in pretty good shape. I have not had to replace anything except for the belt. There's a footage counter on here, which is driven off a belt off the take-up reel, and the belt snapped. But other than that, it's all direct drive, which is pretty good. Now let's look at the Sony machine. I'm going to show you one over here for a minute. Let me just take this camera off. Okay, so this guy back here is the first Sony 1-inch machine that was sold in the US. It's called an EV200. All the Sony 1-inch machines originally were called EVs. This one will not. It's also a two-head design. And I'll talk later about how they did some servo work on these machines. This is the last one in that family. There was another one called the UV340, which came after this. But this guy edited, made pretty good pictures, had a flying erase head. They did something really strange, though. In order to synchronize the output with external sync, which it would do, they used they're belt driven. They don't have a direct drive on the drum or on the capstan. They're belt driven. So what they did was they took a DC motor and put it in the drive belt path, and they used it as a generator. They had actually a transistor circuit that would put a variable resistance across the motor and slow it down. And that's how they were able to achieve synchronization. Very strange. Okay, so let's go on a little further here. Okay, so now the next bunch we have is American Machine. This is a IBC. They built 4 different families of these things. This 800 was the first family, and they were originally sold by Bell and Howell. And then I think after about 6 months, IBC started selling them direct. The 800 family had the most variations. This particular one is the last one in this family. It's got a built-in insert and assemble edit feature, color, sort of. Again, the way that they got color on this machine was it was direct record. So you just recorded the signal on a tape. And then when you went to play it back, there's a PC board in here that takes the signal off tape, demodulates the color, and then remodulates it using a local stable 358 oscillator. And it sort of works, but the picture quality is, so-so. Although, they like to advertise, it's broadcast quality on this stuff. Not in my opinion. So now the other families, there was a 600, which was a mechanical. These are all solenoid control, but the first one was mechanical. Then they came out with this one, then the 900. Then later they came out with a 700, which was a more of an economy model. And frankly, I think they're rough. They're rough machines. Okay, let's take a look at Ampex now. Take a look over here. Okay, so this machine in the back was the first Ampex 1-inch machine that was ever made. Was designed in Elk Grove Village in Chicago. And the way you can tell it's old is by the height of these hubs. The later machines, they went to this design with a higher hub. So if you see one with the shallow nibs on it, that's the original 7000. This came out in June 1965. And the guy that brought us the first one to play with plugged it in, and a huge cloud of white smoke came out of it. And he said, I'll be back tomorrow. So it didn't start out with the best the best performance. But the one thing about this particular format that I always found interesting was that the picture quality was fantastic. Signal to noise ratio and the bandwidth were just beautiful. The thing was great. You know, I would expect no less from Ampex. So now if we get to this guy, after this machine, there was another one called the 6000, which was a lower cost. They took out the XLR connectors and put in phone plugs and stuff like that to get the cost down. But I don't think they sold very many of those. Now this one is the 7500. It was the third one that came out, and it has a high band mode. So this thing will actually record up to about 4.5 megahertz. I don't know if it ever did PAL. I'm not sure if they ever sold any into the European market, but it does a good job with color. Again, no editing, one head, but very good video performance on it, and also one channel of audio, and that changed. All right, let's look at go on for more Ampex machines. Here's the last of what I call the bathtub models. This machine is called the VPR 7900, and they added another modulation mode in this machine. They changed the vertical control track frequency from 60 hertz to 30 hertz, switchable, and it's got 3 standards here for the carrier. It's got the original low band, it's got the high band from the 7500, and then the very high. And that very high band is what became Type A and Type C. So this machine actually works quite well. One of the things interesting too is the capstan. All these Ampex machines used a single capstan, the tape wrapped around the thing twice. Now, what they did was they found out that if they split this capstan in the middle and viscous coupled the bottom half to the top, they got better performance on the machine. And the only thing wrong with that is that every one of the capstans on every machine that I've come across, all of the coating, and they covered it with neoprene. Every one is falling apart. The coating is just gone. So we were very fortunate that George Athan out in California agreed to fix these. And about, I don't know, a few of my friends, we got together, we got 10 of these things and sent them out to George, and for a very good amount of money, he rebuilt them, and it's still working okay. So this machine works pretty good. Ampex had a time-based corrector for this thing, which sat underneath it. And I apologize, I don't have it out here. It's right behind me, but it just ran out of time. So I don't have that guy. Well, let's continue here. Okay, so that bathtub machine became this. This is the first machine that SMPTE decided to standardize. It's called Type A. The interesting thing about this particular machine, other than the fact that it's quite reliable compared to the other machines, is that it developed, this is where they developed what's called automatic scan tracking. And what they did was in the head, they added a crystal, a piece of quartz crystal like you'd have in a microphone, and they apply voltage on both sides of the crystal to deform it. And what they do then is they measure in the electronics, they measure the RF off tape, and they use that to dither the head. And by doing that, the machine will always peak itself on the middle of the video track. And that takes care of issues with alignment. The alignment on these older machines was very difficult. I remember spending days on these guys trying to make sure that the video track was set up some kind of a standard. So that was a great improvement. And that became that was the basis for the Type C. In fact, most of these VPR1 machines don't exist anymore. They've been converted. They're Type C, which involved just changing the scanner, and I think some minor electrical work. But there's a few of them probably still in service. Okay, now we're going to move on to C format. Ampex and Sony are not the only companies working on this stuff. Here's a Hitachi HR200. This machine didn't sell very well in the major markets, the top 10 markets, but I think in other parts of the country, you'll find quite a few of these. It's not bad. Made good pictures. It was standard. It would interchange with all the other machines. There was a later version of this called the HR230, which was a much improved version. Worked really well. So Hitachi was in. Toshiba made C format machines, but never sold them in the US that I'm aware of. Okay, let's go further down here. Great. All right. So after that VPR1 that you saw, this was developed. This is called a VPR2B, and it's a console machine. I actually got some tape on it. I'll play it for you. I'll show you how that AST thing works. Okay, so this machine's running here, and I'll go into the waveform monitor. I hope you can see this. There's an RF thing going on here. Let me see if I'm looking at the right thing. Yeah. No, it's not showing it too bad. When the AST is working, you'll see a sort of a sine wave modulation of the RF. There you go. Okay, so that's the dithering that's going on, that the video head is being moved up and down to follow the track. I don't know if you guys can see that. Pretty tough. But anyway, this machine was very popular. Quite a few of these were sold. They were used on trucks because they were compact. This particular one is console mounted, but the transport's only this big, and the rest of it's just fluff to support the machine. Okay.
John, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
During my career at Dolby Labs, I worked on a audio replacement board for the VPR2 to give that machine Dolby noise reduction. I'm wondering if you have one of those boards.
No, I don't, but I do over here. I'll show you what I do. Okay, so now this guy is Sony's answer to the VPR2. This is a BVH 1100. There was an earlier machine called the 1000, which wasn't any type of a standard. And besides this machine, you need this time base corrector that's sitting down here in the bottom. So this thing took up a lot of space. Some people took the electronics, which are mounted in the rear, and they brought them around to the front of a rack so they could service it. Now you got a whole rack full of stuff for just one tape recorder, which was something that I think they were trying to get away from. But it worked fine. CBS used these on the air for years. Absolutely no complaints, no problems. The only thing about it is it's 90 minutes. You can't put a 2-hour roll of tape on it. And that's the same thing with this machine. The maximum time you can do on this machine is 90 minutes. So Sony and FX went back to the drawing board, and this came out. This is called the BVH 2000. And by the way, both of these Sony machines have that automatic tracking. They call it DT, dynamic tracking. I think they licensed it from Ampex, but they both work the same way. And in fact, the Sony machine, you can actually switch between the head and both of these, you can switch between the heads and playback. So if you lose a head, if you lose the playhead, you can switch over use the record head. You just lose the dynamic tracking capability. But this is very popular machine. Oh, and you see that time-based corrector down there, that box that's 6 rack units, it weighs about 80 pounds. Well, in this machine, it's 4 PC boards that are sitting inside the card cage. So this machine has all the functionality that does with the time-based corrector. So amazing what they were able to do to squeeze that electronics into that machine. Okay. Now let's take a ride over to Germany. Here are a pair of Bosch machines. These are made in Darmstadt, Germany. This one is NTSC, that one is PAL. Let's fire this guy up here. Comes up pretty fast. This machine is all analog, and what that display is showing is the time-based corrector window, and the jitter in the middle is the amount of correction that's being done to the tape, and the 2 vertical lines are the window limits. This is a segmented scan machine. And of course, the problem with segmented scan is when you stop it, there's no picture in stop. There's nothing there, because it takes 5 or 6 scans of the drum to reproduce 1 frame. In fact, you can see the breakup on that TBC display and stability is showing you what each of the heads is picking up off the tape. So these were multi-standard. They would do PAL M, PAL B, CCAM, NT. This is an NTSC machine. It works very well. It's not new. Now, they were, of course, criticized for not being able to do slow motion, which is one of the advantages of those previous machines I showed you. All of those machines scan with 1 revolution of the drum. They reproduce a whole picture, so you could stop the tape and still get a picture. You can't do that way. You can edit. You can't do that with these machines. So what Bosch did was they built that thing down there on the bottom, that bottom chassis, which is a frame buffer, and they did some really mechanically strange things, so that if you go in here and push slow or stop, that thing would actually drive the transport and make it do crazy things, but you'd get a very nice slow-mo picture out of it. It was a pretty rough solution to the problem of not being able to slow down the tape. But it worked, did the job. My PAL machine here doesn't have that. It's just a regular 50 cycle VTR. Okay, let's take a look at some more stuff. Okay, I guess we'll go down here. Okay, so let's look at some high definition tape recorders. The machine here on the left is an analog VTR, and the transport may look familiar. It's the same transport as their Type C machine that I showed you before. Now, what they did to record high definition was to install 4 heads in place of 1. So they write 4 tracks. The video that comes in is component. It's red, green, and blue, or color difference. They take the luminance channel and they frequency divide it into 2 10 megahertz channels. And then they record green 1, green 2, red and blue on the tape. And then when they recover it, when you play it back, they recover that. I'll show you the electronics for this. That's what it takes to get the picture back off the tape. Quite a complicated thing, but not as complicated as this one. The next one over here, this is the digital VTR. It records 1.2 gigabits per second on 1-inch tape. The tape my recollection is that we paid about $1,100 a roll wholesale for that videotape back in the day. The processor down here takes care of dividing up the video. Again, this machine records 8 parallel tracks on the videotape, 128 kilobits each. And this machine, I got this thing working, so let's fire this up. See what we got here. The head is spinning at about 8,000 RPM.
Do I remember correctly that this HD machine had some kind of a knife blade to scrape the tape clean?
Sorry, what's that, Wayne?
Do I remember correctly that this HD machine had some kind of a knife blade to clean the tape?
Oh, I don't remember that. This one doesn't have anything like that. You use xylene or trichlor on a cloth to clean the heads, and you do it very carefully. And the other thing that you have to be careful of is that the audio, it's 8 channels of digital audio, and the heads are dash. You know, I don't know if you guys know what dash is. Dash is an audio format, digital audio stationary head. It's very easy to damage the audio heads in this. So you've got to wipe them horizontally rather than up and down like you normally would. This was quite a piece of work when this was invented. The fact that it can do what it does. Let me see if we got a picture up here yet. It's coming up in a second.
I do recall that we had several modifications early on in terms of head life and tape cleaning, and so I may not be remembering exactly what it was, but the earliest machines had trouble with dirt, and the later ones did too. But
yeah, Wayne, they did a couple things. I know they improved the heads. I know they changed out the pinch roller a couple of times too. They had terrible luck with the pinch rollers for some reason. But this machine records, I think it's 25 megahertz and 15 and 15. So this machine, the analog machine, does 20, 10, 10. This one's a little better, but it's not a full bandwidth 30 megahertz machine, as some people think it is. It's not. It's still limited bandwidth. And you know, the idea being that the color difference channels don't need the bandwidth. But it's still a very impressive piece of equipment. And the fact that, you know, this machine was developed around 1990. It disappeared. Everybody bought one of these things. A lot of them are here. But as soon as the first cassette machine came out, which was the Panasonic D5 with an adapter, this machine was it was just not practical anymore. But it records the 8 channels of digital audio, so you can do 5.1 plus 2 channels of left total, right total on the tape. So very impressive, but no parts anymore. If I lose the heads on these, we're gone. So you know, that's that. Okay, let me shut that down. And let's take a look, one last look over here. Okay, these are Type C machines that Ampex developed. And the nifty thing about them, this is a console version. This one over here is a raw version, the way you'd buy the machine just without any mounts. And That thing at the bottom down there is called a Zeus. And it made for some very interesting things you could do. One thing they did was develop a software thing called multi-gen. And you could turn the machine into that mode. And I haven't figured out yet. I don't think my machine has the software to do that, but you could record and play and recycle video back and forth about 10 times. So it would record about 10 or 12 lines of video, and then it would recycle it through this process, play it back off tape, and re-record it, and on and on and on. And what happened was at the end of it, you could see what your picture would look like 10 generations down. And you could easily trim up the record circuits, the bias, or anything else you wanted to do to get the best possible multi-gen performance. And that was very clever. These are pretty much still in demand, these machines, by people that, you know, want to work with C format. That Zeus is the first time-base corrector that records and stores an entire field. And you can there's a control panel that comes with it, or you can control it from the front of the machine. Very clever. Let's go over and let's look at some other things here. I've got a little collection of portables. Okay, so what I've got up here in the back are a pair of Bosch machines. This is a BCN20. And it's compatible with the big studio machine. In fact, what's nice is that the scanner, it comes out with 2 short quarter-turn fasteners, and that scanner is the same one that's in the big machine. So if you break a scanner and you don't have one, you can pop it out of your portable. The problem is most of these machines are really heavy. This guy is a BCN21. It's a PAL machine, and it weighs very little. I can't believe how light it is compared to the other ones. I can't even lift that one on the left. Both of these, the only problem I've had with them is the pinch rollers. I've had new pinch rollers made, and they're very easily done. Here's the Ampex VPR 20. This is their first their first C format portable machine. They did make an earlier one called a VPR 10, which was A format, but I don't think they sold very many. Power supply plugged in the side, and there's the battery for it. It's pretty big and it's heavy. It's much heavier than telephones. Okay, now here's the Sony version of that. It's called a BVH 500. Works well. It was very popular, and I suspect most of it had to do with the salesman. But many of these were sold, and they worked very well. Here's a Hitachi version of that. Works good. Again, not too many were sold. I think most of that had to do with people not knowing that they actually made one. And then here's the real nice portable. This is an Ampex machine, but it was designed and built by Nagra. And it weighs very little. A couple of cute features. Right now, this plate that I have on it is good for a 1 hour. You can record 1 hour rolls of tape on this thing. But if you push this lever up and rotate that down, and you take this plate off, now you've got a really small machine that'll hold 20-minute loads of tape, and you can carry it. It's really quite lightweight. Let me show you something here. One of the things that Nagra brought to the party was their knowledge of machining. And you can see here that they've milled out all the excess metal here and also in the base machine. That of course, makes the weight much lighter, and a very clever thing to do. By the way, the motors are in the hub. There's no separate motor under the machine. That's why I can swing them like that. So very clever. One thing about all these machines is that, except for the BPR 20, I don't know how this happened, but they all use the same 12 volts. They all draw close to the same amount of current, and they use the same XLR 4-pin plug. So I don't know whether that was something to do with Sony setting the standard, everybody following, but it was really great because to this day, there's equipment being built that still uses that same connector. AJA Corporation builds a lot of nifty recorders these days, and they all run on the same XLR plug and the same power supply. Very nice. And I'm going to show you two more things. This is I told you I wouldn't talk about anything about reel-to-reel, but this is an IBC 1-inch cartridge machine. You lift up the lid, pop this thing in there, and the take-up reel is inside the mechanism. This one says RCA. I didn't know that they had anything to do with this, but and I haven't got this working yet, but I have the documentation on it. And there was a 200. There was a newer version of this, but I'd love to get this working someday. Just a matter of time. So I've got one more machine that I can show you. Let me get my part here.
John, do you have a Cartravision home 1-inch recorder?
1-inch? Cartravision never made anything with a 1-inch.
Oh, sorry, it was 1/2-inch. Never mind.
Yeah. No, that's another whole subject. We've got 1/2-inch stuff all over the place, but that's different than this. These machines, of course, became broadcast quality at the end of the day. And of course, with that HD stuff at the end that I showed you at the end there, it became very high performance. But got one more. Okay, I just got this thing. I frankly don't know much about it yet. This is a Grundig BK224, and I think it was built for the medical business. It uses a two-head design. It's beautifully, the machine work on it's magnificent. It's gorgeous. It's like that Nagra machine, and it's got indicators for what I think are two line rates. It's 525 and 1023. Now, 1023 was one of the original EIA 343 standards for higher speed, higher scan speed video back in the day. So I don't know much about this yet. I haven't turned it on, but it uses 1-inch tape, so I thought I'd include it. So, Dave, that does it for me.
John, what is your business? Do you do video transfer work or?
No. We're system integrators. We've been doing that for 57 years.
John,
Yeah.
a couple of questions for you. Back when I was in high school, circa 1970 through 1974, we had an IVC 600.
Yeah.
And also two Bell and Howell machines, a Bell and Howell 2910 and a Bell and Howell 2920. I was hoping you'd have one of the Bell and Howell machines.
Well, I have a Bell and Howell, but it's just an IBC 800. It's the same machine. So I just showed you the one IBC. I've got a bunch of these things around here. The 870 that I showed you before is basically the same as the Bell and Howell, except it's been modified up the hilt. It's got flying erase heads. It's color. It's got all kinds of features. IBC 600. You know, you had one, so you know about that. But
yeah,
the Bell and Howell they were the distribution arm for IBC when they first started, both for their VTRs and for their cameras.
Okay. The other question I have is with regard to the Bosch multi-system machine. How did that thing handle the chroma on CCAM, since the chroma on CCAM is not linear?
Yeah. I've never
Just
run
curious
it.
about that.
I don't know. I had the manuals. I could look it up and figure it out, but I never tried it. I have some PAL tapes. I run the machine in PAL. One other thing about those BCN machines, even though they're multi-standard, they're not multi-switchable standard. So to make one go from NTSC to PAL, you've got to change about half the modules in the machine. And it's just not practical to do that. Now the PAL machine will do CCAM, but I don't know exactly how it works. I know a lot about the NTSC machine because when I got the one I have, it didn't work. And it took me a while to fix it. It had some bad delay lines and some other things that are unobtainium. But that's a good question, John. I don't know.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Sorry.
Thank you for the trip down memory lane on the 50th anniversary of my high school graduation.
Yeah, they were very popular for the high schools. Yep.
Don, I have a question about the first few machines you showed. Were they intended for home use for rich people, or?
Well, the Helical was. The rest of them, I don't think so. They were intended more for corporations, schools, some government work, things like that.
And did they meet any standard between manufacturers, or they were all on their own?
Nope.
Okay.
None of them. We didn't get interchange on these machines until Ampex came out with the VR 7000, 6000, 7500, 78, 79, and eventually Type A. Now, nobody else but Ampex built Type A, so there's no interchange with that.
Right.
The original Sony 1-inch machine, not the EVs, but the BVH version, it was not compatible. In fact, there's quite an interesting story about that. When the VPR1 and the BVH 1000 came out, the networks took a close look at them and determined that they were certainly suitable for use on the air. And they could save them a lot of money over buying new head wheels for their quads every 500 hours. The problem was they weren't compatible. So Joe Flaherty and Mike Sherlock and Julie Barnathan authored a common letter, and they sent it to Sony and Ampex and said, "Gentlemen, we're not buying any more of your stuff until you fix this." So everybody panicked, and they got SMPTE involved. And SMPTE started an all-industry committee, and that is where the Type C format came from. It was actually designed by committee, and there were some interesting disagreements. One of them had to do with the sync track. As I mentioned earlier, with these machines that have one head, and like the IVC machine had one head. When the head went off the tape to get to the next layer of tape, you had a dropout. Now, on the IVC machine, they put that on the back porch, and that was great, except that as the heads wore, and as the guides wore, and as the machine started to get a little bit out of alignment, that narrow one line of dropout became 5 lines, and then 10 lines. And then the other thing that happened was the servo started to get sloppy. So you had this dropout, and now it's moving back and forth in the vertical interval. And as soon as it hit the vertical sync pulses, you know what happened to the picture. It's gone.
Right.
So that was some of the issues with the IVC machine in terms of reliability. We had a lot of fun fixing and calibrating those machines back in the early 70s.
I have one question. When you went to the high definition machine, I assume that was analog high definition?
Well, there are two of them I showed you. The one on the left was analog, and the one on the right was digital.
Okay. And what was the definition of high definition in the analog machine?
Well, it was designed to record. It would record 1125 scan lines.
Okay.
1030. I'm sorry, 1035. It was 1035i. In fact, so was the digital machine. They were 1035. The industry later determined that we should go to 1080, I didn't show you the blanking width on those machines. If you look at the vertical blanking interval, it's quite large, and it didn't need to be so big. So again, SMPTE got involved with this and standardized 1080. And when, again, the Panasonic machine came out, the D5, and of course the Sony HD Cam were compliant with the SMPTE standard, but the Sony machine was not, and there was nothing they could do to fix it because 1035 lines was baked into the format, baked into the design of the recorder.
Right.
Was
Well,
that called
thanks a lot. It was a
HDVS?
great presentation.
Thank you. Chuck, I'm sorry, Chuck.
Yeah. Was that called HDVS or something like that?
Well, that's a trade name. That's like Jello.
Okay.
Everybody keeps calling it HDVS. That's just Sony's trade name for what it is. It doesn't mean anything other than, it's like RCA couldn't use videotape.
Okay, we have an HDVS Sony camera, serial number 4, and it's kind of a mystery. You brought back a horrible memory almost with the IBC machines, though, because my first job out of college worked for a company that decided they get in the videotape duplicating business.
Oh.
And they had a whole bunch of Bell and Howell and IVC machines, just like the one you had, and they wouldn't interchange between each other. I mean, it'd play back fine on the machine you recorded it on. Put it on another machine, good luck.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you about this Helical machine that I showed you, the first one. That machine was used to record by Andy Warhol to record his home movies on. And and I know that because the foundation brought a couple of the tapes over to me to see if I could play them. And I couldn't. So I started researching the machine a little bit, and I found out that interchange was not guaranteed. So I think I spent about 2 weeks of time back when I had time and tried to adjust the guides and the wrap angle to try to get it to work. No luck. Couldn't do it.
A couple comments about the Ampex machines. There were the 5000 series, which was better than the 7000 because it got rid of the bolts.
No, I don't agree. 5000, they were terrible. The only machine in that family that was any good was a 5200, 5800.
Those were the ones that I used.
Well, they were the last machines that Ampex built. They had caps and servos. They were designed for editing. But the 7900 that I showed you over there will blow the pants off those 5000 machines.
Absolutely. The other part was that Ampex also had the X-ray machines, which had extra wide bandwidth of those, and our X-ray department used them, and they worked.
Yeah, here's the thing. I've got a IBC X-ray machine, and I was very curious because I know the format doesn't really have good bandwidth. I was curious what they were doing, so looked into it, and it turns out that all they're really doing is changing the servo so that it will work with 1023 line horizontal. Still 60 cycle vertical, still 30 millisecond frame rate, and the bandwidth never got fixed. So the machine would record the signal, but you weren't getting any improvement and you weren't capturing the resolution. I'm not surprised that Ampex could make that work, but the IBC never did.
Also, I worked with Fred Remley, and he was on that committee to set the standards. And it was an interesting time talking to him about that.
Yep.
And I threw out a couple comments to him, and they ended up going to the committee, which I was surprised.
Yeah. Oh well, that was a.
Hey, I wanted to ask if Chris Hill is being photographed from a fluoroscope. Looks like he's getting
I don't know what's wrong with my camera. Most of the time it doesn't even work on this thing. I could shut it off, but
because we don't want you to die from X-ray.
John,
we're having the zombie attack apocalypse now.
John, what is an X-ray machine?
It's a lot of X-ray equipment will output a video signal, Steve, and the vendors of those machines, GE and Philips, pretty much started their video captured based on American TV standards. So they started with the frame rate, and they decided to use the same rate we use, 60 hertz. But then they wanted higher resolution, and as Chris pointed out, and they went to the EIA RS 343 standard, which has been out for a long time, and that standard defines a number of higher rate horizontal scan standards. I think there's an 819, there's a whole bunch of them, but the top of them is 1023. And that's what that Grundig machine that I have will record. Now, I don't know whether the bandwidth of that Grundig is any wider. A lot of these attempts to do that, they didn't change the modulation system at all, or any of the parameters with video, so they couldn't record more than 2.5, 3 megahertz, which was IBC's problem. So if they, I'm going to find out with that Grundig what it can do. I'm very curious what the bandwidth is on it.
At the X-ray department at U of M, they had image orthicon cameras that actually took the pictures, and they were using those, and it was still standard RS-170, 525/60, because we would get those tapes and play them back on regular monitors. So there were multiple ways of doing it, but as I understood, if my memory is right, that the X-ray machines had a wider bandwidth, and I think they moved the carrier frequencies a little bit in the Ampex machines, but I'm not 100% sure. And they may have changed the emphasis, de-emphasis.
Yeah. Well, that's what, that's what IBC did in their 1010 model, but it didn't they didn't preserve the resolution that was available out of the orthicon tubes.
John?
Yes, sir.
Apparently you're in a Class Act building there. How large is your building, and where are you located at?
I'm in northern New Jersey. I built this building about 20 years ago, and I've got about, 15,000 square feet. And the building, the property that I'm on, funny story, was owned by the chief engineer of Ballantine Laboratories. And this whole area that I'm in, within walking distance, we had Booten Radio, Booten Electronics, Measurements Corporation, Ballantine Laboratories, and originally Ferris Instrument. They were all located right here. I'm at the corner of Booten, Parsippany, and Mountain Lakes. And I walked into this building, what was originally a small building here one day. I used to live down the street, and I said to the guy, Ed Osterland, I said, Ed, this is a beautiful little building, just what I need for my company. And he said, John, he says, and I knew this guy from my IEEE meetings. He said, my wife and I were just talking this morning about calling a realtor and putting it on the market. So he sold it to me, and he held the mortgage for 30 years. What was I tell you? Sometimes you just get lucky.
How lucky can you get? I'm glad I got the properties that I got, because they're unaffordable now, and your taxes are just crazy.
Yeah. Well, the taxes up here are
outrageous.
Lunatic. Yeah. Lunacy. Yeah.
What town are you in? Parsippany?
No, it's just Mountain Lakes. It's
Mountain Lakes.
Yeah, it's a small town, and it's sandwiched between Denville, Booten, and Parsippany. Route 287 is right around the corner from me, and Route 80 is on the other side of town. So it's a pretty convenient place. I can get almost anywhere from here.
Are you on the main floor there, or are you in the basement? Do you have an upstairs, or?
No. Well, the main part of the building is a single story, but it's 30 foot high. I put it in high enough so I could do stuff if I wanted to. But on the front of the building, I have 2 stories, and I have a library on the 2nd floor. And I just hope it's packed. And I hope that the structure is good enough not to come down on the office.
I know that feeling.
Yeah. No, I've got, for all these machines that I showed you, I've got pretty good documentation on all of them. I've got extender boards for almost all of them. test jigs and stuff like that. You can't work on this stuff without acquiring this peripheral material. If you don't have extenders and documentation, you're going to be dead in the water, especially the 1-inch machines. And there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of stuff that went on in their design. I was very fortunate, Charlie Anderson was a personal friend of mine from Ampex, and the guys that worked in Chicago at EIPD group that made the bathtub machines, I knew all of them. So that helped. I mean, anybody trying to start out today with this would have a tougher time of it. So.
And John, you have the RA4000, correct?
Yes, I do.
I've got a book for it, and I can tell you how to hook it up to an AVR.
Well, I've got an AVR one, which I don't know if you saw it back there, but it was behind. Yeah, it was behind. Yeah. And then I've got a pair of AVR 3s here too. So, and a pair of AVR 2s. So
AVR 2s require a special thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to put my email in the chat and send me an email. Okay.
Okay. Yes, sir. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you very much for the presentation, John. Much appreciated.
Anytime. Glad to help.
Absolutely. I think you win the most toys award for the day.
John, that was great. Thank you very much for presenting again. It's a field I don't know a lot about, and I really need to hear it.
Well, Steve, it's a constant learning process, even with these machines that I've lived with for 40 or 50 years.
Right.
I'd still learn stuff about them every day. Like the reason I didn't show you that analog high def machine is because the pinch roller, and this is a Sony thing. Everybody who works with Sony machines gets to know this. They just don't understand lubricants. And this goes for their cassette decks and everything, is that what goes, the electronics are superbly designed, but the mechanics, that I went to fire that machine up and I haven't had it running in about a year, and the pinch roller is like frozen because the grease or oil they use is just solidified. That's and they're small format cassette decks. The complaints that I keep hearing from people with Betacam decks, for example, are that they won't thread, they don't unthread, it's all and the threading rings are jammed up. It's all lubricant driven, which is really funny because these older machines over here, the Norelco and that Victor company machine, they work great. I can turn them on right now and get great pictures out of them. And in fact, the Norelco's got its original rubber. I haven't done anything to that machine other than put a video output connector on it. But it's pretty much stock from 1962.
Well, if there aren't more questions for John, he can always ask him anytime as long as he sticks around. Let's move on to just general discussion. Anybody got any topic they want to bring up and so forth? Go for it.
I've got just a couple things to say about the recorders. At one point, I got to visit the Trio video remote truck that was doing the Cubs baseball games in Chicago. And they had the recorders with the dynamic tracking. So their replay and slow-mo machine was one of those. And what they had done is taken one of those rubber door stops with like a dimple in the center, glued that to the take-up reel, and for the slow-mo replay, the guy would just stick his thumb in that divot on the take-up reel and wind it gently around, and heads would track and you get perfect frame by frame slow-mo.
John, I've got another question for you
Sure.
on those, a lot of those aluminum reels that they used. They had like a little foam, to smooth the tape out as it was being threaded.
Yep.
And that foam inside those reels, of course, as you well know, deteriorates.
Yep.
What's your best approach on those things? I think those reels do come apart, don't they?
Yeah, they're screwed together, so they're really easy to take the flanges off and get rid of that stuff. And that's if you have a tape cleaner. I've got an Osaka 1-inch tape cleaner here. I've got a tapography one too, but it's the thing's got a microprocessor in it and RAM and EEPROMs, and I think the EEPROMs have lost their brains, because which is something that I'm worried about with some other stuff. All of these the VPR2 and the VPR1s have programmable memory in them, and I don't have the programming charts for those, so you could put them. I have a reader. I could put them in a reader, capture the program, and store it on a file. But that's another part of the machine, just like the heads. If you lose those proms in this equipment, you're SOL. It's just dead.
On those BVP 1100 series and Sonys that you have, I think I've got 4 of those machines down here. Do you have much trouble out of there? Are they belt driven or?
No, they're all direct drive. The ones I have are 1100As. There was a lot of improvements made in the A version of that machine. I don't know. RCA used to private label these too. I don't know whether the RCAs ever went to 1100As. I think by that point they didn't. Oh, there's a machine I wanted to show you guys, but I couldn't get it out of the trailer. It's an RCA TR800, which is a New Jersey designed and built 1-inch C format machine. And those poor guys, they tried for years to make the scanner work, and they couldn't get it. So they finally went to Sony, and they bought the BVH 1100 scanners and put it in their machine. So the 2 machines that I have, the RCA machines, have Sony scanners in them. But they were working. They were at a TV station up in New York State, and they donated them, replaced them with VPR3s.
Well, I mentioned those tape reels having that material that deteriorates. When you clean them up and remove all that old material, is there anything I can put back in its place, or can I just leave them?
No, you know what? There's plenty of, you don't have to worry about that. Just either spool them onto another reel that doesn't use the foam or have that foam lip on it, or just put them back together again. They'll be fine.
And sometimes that stuff gets off on the tape itself.
Well, that's why you need it. That's why you need a cleaner, because basically you're absolutely right. That's what'll happen. It'll migrate itself down onto the tape.
Can you remove it from the tape, or is the tape ruined at that point?
No, it's all right. You can get it off. Cleaners will get it off.
Alcohol or anything on the tape itself?
No, don't do that. Nope, that's a bad idea.
Okay. What would be good for removing it from the tape itself, if you can take it off foot by foot?
I honestly don't know. I've never had the problem. I've got a again, a 1-inch cleaner, a 2-inch cleaner, and a baking machine. And I've never run into a situation where I couldn't get the tape clean enough to play. So I'm sure there's cases where, depending on how the tape was packed when it was rewound, that stuff could ooze down into the tape. You might be stuck.
And you don't want to use any solvents because you can actually destroy the binder and remove the oxide from the tape, and the tape is no longer playable. So the only way to really do it is use a tape cleaning device such as RTI, was it?
Yeah, yeah.
Elcon, there were a bunch of them.
RTI made some really good stuff. I've got some RTI cassette cleaners that work great.
No, I'm curious. These are all 1-inch tape recorders. Was the media the same among them? Did you just buy a 1-inch tape, or was there some specificity to the exact media that work with the exact machine? And then also, how robust is that media? You know, the binders can deteriorate and you can lose the oxide. So what's your experience in that?
Well, I'll tell you a story, a short story. Years ago, I was hired to record Governor Rockefeller in the grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria. So I figured, okay, how can I guarantee I don't screw this up? So I had a Sony EV machine, I had an Ampex, and I had an IVC. I brought them all over there. Started everything running. Everything was going great. About 10 minutes into his speech, the IVC machine gave it up. Another 5 minutes, the Ampex machine gave it up. Then finally, the EV gave it up. You know what the only common ingredient was? It was Memorex Chroma 80. Probably the worst thing that's ever been fostered onto us. It's horrible tape. Just horrible stuff. I had about 6 pallets of that stuff, and I took it in my car. So I drove it over to the salesman who was in Hanover, not too far from here, and I left it in his driveway. I said, just don't ever come back with this stuff, and don't ever show your face in our building again. I mean, just because I lost the broadcast. It's bad news. But other than that, I mean, the 3M stuff's been good. The best tape I've ever had is Fuji. I had somebody send me a whole pile of Fuji tapes from Radio City Music Hall with Ginger Rogers on it. And the quality, I couldn't believe the quality. Well, first of all, BCN makes an incredible picture. And these are recorded by a company called Continental Color in New York City. And they were a Bosch house. They had Bosch cameras, and the cameras they used were a YUV design. So they had a luminance channel, not a green channel, and then 2 color difference channels, and they synthesized the green. I couldn't believe the picture quality, and this is NTSC. I mean, you know, and I work with high def all the time. So, you know, to see this stuff as an NTSC feed, it was impressive, very, very impressive. And that's Fuji, and that tape was, you know, 50 years. So, good luck with that. People complain about Ampex tape. I've had good luck with Ampex tape. Sony tape's good. Like I said, the only problem I have, and it's a personal problem, is Memorex. This stuff is just horrendous.
So
hey, Matt, I'm sorry, Matt, we couldn't hear you. Okay.
I got my camera to work.
Yeah, there you go.
Went to high def. Fuji tape stunk. It had a weird smell.
Yeah, I don't know. I've had really good luck with it. I mean, even the Fuji quad tape and the B format. You know, I don't know how that stuff worked with C format, but on the Bosch machine, it just was beautiful. The stuff we got out of storage from Radio City was just magnificent. I couldn't believe it, and I think they shot that stuff in the early 70s.
Well, there was another thing about tape. There are different coercivities or different pieces of tape.
Yep.
And I know 2-inch tape, there was the 379, and when they went up to 400, it was a little bit more strength in the magnetic field. Then the mirror image master tape was really super high coercivity, and you couldn't erase it with an eraser.
Yeah.
Unless you tried.
Where is it here? This
And also the wind is different on an IBC machine than an Ampex machine for 1 inch.
it's not just the wind, it's the tape hub, because it won't take more than an 8-inch tape. This is the stuff that 3M came out with for the high band Ampex machine. And I don't know what this model of this stuff was, but you know, the nice thing about it was a lot of these things happened together. You know, these guys came out with a with improvements in the machine, improvements in the modulator and the servos. And at the same time, the tape manufacturers were working on their formulations. So a lot of this stuff, happened in concert with the tape people. It's obviously a very important part of the thing. The VPR3s I had on the end here have a storage system in it where you can actually memorize the characteristics of different types of videotape. And if you have a house, a dub house or a recording house where you're using tapes from different manufacturers, you can optimize the machine for each tape and then store all the settings, and it'll set the machine back up immediately. That's kind of a neat feature.
I just remembered 3M made a 1 inch Type C machine for a while too.
No, it was NEC.
Oh, they marketed the NEC machine?
Yeah, and it was a horrible machine. There were two of them, a TT7000 and TT8000. And we put a pair of the 7000 into Epcot Center in 1982. And I think they lasted 3 months, but they were being run 24 hours a day. But they were not very good machines. I certainly think the Hitachi that I have here, the HR200, is a much better recorder. But I know there are broadcasters in the country that bought those NEC machines, and
Well, Ampex also sold, let Marconi sell them, their VPR2s under their Marconi name. All it was change the badge, change the instruction book.
Yeah, but it was the same machine.
Yeah.
Yep.
Since you have in your picture the early type Ampex machines, the 7000 series there.
Right.
One of the worst things about them was the guides. They were movable guides, and they could not stay in interchange more than a couple months at the most, if you were lucky. We were always running alignment tapes on them and adjusting.
Yeah, they tried all kinds of tricks. They finally glip-tolled all the set screws on them, and it didn't really fix it. I mean, I haven't turned this machine on in a while, but I wouldn't be surprised that it wouldn't play an interchange tape properly without me getting in here with a Allen wrench and doing some work on those guides. This machine had the same thing. They were just a little more beefy. They had a few more screws in them to hold them on. But the problem with these 78, 79s is the split pinch roller, the split capstan. That was tough. The original ones, these machines have solid rubber rollers on them, and these are original. This one here is from 1965, and it's as good as new. So they should have left good enough alone, but I think they wanted to get the error down so they could, time-based stable. This machine, the 7900, will H-lock, which is pretty spectacular considering that the drum is spinning around at 3,000 RPM, not 15,000 RPM. And they were able to actually make this work. If the moon's in the right phase, the machine will H-lock. It may take 8-10 seconds, but it will do it. And the time-based corrector that went with this machine, the TBC 790, was an analog TBC, digitally switched. It was very similar to the AVR1, but it didn't have a one line window. It was relatively short, but it worked. Ampex tried selling this machine in a console version called the 7950 and the 7950A. They tried selling it to broadcasters, but it just wasn't rugged enough. I remember a few stations around here that had them, and we'd go get a call, go down and line them up, and a couple of days later, someone would call and say, "Oh, so and so was fooling around with the machine, and it's all screwed up." So they weren't reliable enough for broadcast service. But when the AST came out, the automatic scan tracking on the head, that was a whole new ball game, and that was over here on the AVR1, the VPR1, this guy. And the principle behind that, if you think about it, it's got a lot in common with the AVR1 and what they did. Because the AVR1 has a mode where you can turn off the control track and just play a tape from the RF, and it does the same thing, except that it's changing the phase of the head. In this one, it's actually bending the head. I should go get one of those heads and show you how it's built, but very, very smart. And they're still available, and there are companies that will rebuild them for you if you are so inclined.
Well, John, one of the reasons that the split capstan was put in, I remember putting them in the early machines, was because the tension errors were so extreme with one capstan that you couldn't adjust it with get it down to nothing. You had to have, because the capstan was you couldn't slip one or tighten it or loosen it with the tension arm enough.
Well, it was a great idea.
It was a great idea, but as we used to say, we'd love to have an IVC transport with Ampex electronics.
Yeah, yep. Well, the split capstan was a great idea, but they made it out of neoprene, which was not a great idea. Because you guys remember, I remember this from high school, the thing called an iodine clock. It was you could mix up a substance that used iodine as one ingredient, and you let it sit. And you could actually predict how many hours it would take before the thing blew up or exploded. That's sort of what happened with these capstans. Everybody I know that has a machine like this with the split capstan, almost every one of them fell apart within a month of each other. Because I got phone calls from friends that said, "Hey, you're 7800, you're 7900. What's going on with the capstan?" I said, "Oh, it just fell apart." "Well, so did mine." And this went on. It was very interesting to have that happen. So, but like I said, George Athan decided he would take on the chore of rebuilding them, and he did. A lot of money though. These kits that Ampex sold us to put these capstans in were about, I don't know, $200 in the late 70s. And I think George Athan charged us about $1,000 a piece to fix them.
John,
yeah.
Speaking of rebuilding, what about quad heads? Years ago, there used to be several manufacturers that could remanufacture the quad heads on it. And then they kept dropping out. And the last I heard that there's one left, I can't remember who it is,
a head
but
tech.
it's only like $3,500 to build a head.
Yeah,
What's the scoop on that now?
A head tech. And frankly, I'm trying to get them to look at it. I got a couple of RCA heads here that are shot, and I'm trying to get them to take them and rebuild them. But so far, they haven't told me when I can ship them.
There's a guy here in Knoxville that used to work for Ampex.
Yeah, Larry, I know him.
I was asking him about that one day, and he was in the head department at Ampex. He designed heads. And I said, you know, when you look at the quad heads, it looks like there's not very much with it. He says, oh, Julian, he says, you don't understand. He said it takes about $1 million worth of equipment to do that with.
Yeah.
And he said it's not as easy as it looks. And I thought, well, so much for that one then.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is the I got a tour of the Ampex head rebuilding plant in Colorado Springs some years ago, and they had one of every model machine that they ever made lined up
along the walls.
Yep, you remember that, Chris?
Oh yeah, I took that tour too.
Okay, so that's how they actually. They had an AVR, they had a VR1000 that they machined out and put an AVR1 sub base in so they could do Mark 20 heads. But they didn't want to tie up an AVR1. So they took an old VR1000 and stuck it in there. But that was very interesting to watch those ladies wind those heads and put those things back together again. It was quite a project.
What does it cost to rebuild a quad head on, say, on those 2-inch quad Ampex machines now?
Well, the last one I had done, was about, I think it was about $3,000.
It's up to
How
about
many
67 now.
Yeah, the last one I had done, I had George, what's his name, in Colorado Springs. He's out of business. He's not doing it anymore. But he also worked at Ampex, and oh boy, right out of my head. This is what happens when you get to be 80 years old. You forget things.
Video magnetics.
Yeah, BMI. Yep. He shut down a couple of years ago, and everybody went crazy, and we're still going crazy.
And you just can't put a pull tip on it because the guide actually wears out, and you'll lose it. Just all sorts of issues with those.
Yeah, it's not just the head
how complicated it is.
Yeah, I mean the motors go bad, the bearings go bad, rotary transformer problems. Everything happens. It's not just a case of the head tips. If that was all it was, that'd be pretty. I can see a guy starting a lab to make the heads or wind them with the right characteristics, but the whole head wheel assembly. I mean, you need first of all, you need a machine to put it in so you can line it up, but you need microscopes. There's all types of dihedral adjustments you have to make to the head wheel.
Balancing them.
Yeah.
It's an art.
It's no fun. Yeah. I mean, they earn their money.
On the quad heads there, when they build them, you said it cost you about $3,000 to do it. How many hours did you say they may be good for?
Well, I think it's very dependent on a couple things. One is the environment. If you've got a clean place where you keep the machine and keep the air in the air where the machine is clean, that's important. Your compressed air supply to the head wheel's got to be clean. It can't be any oil or water in it. You'd be surprised sometimes. I was at a TV station around here years ago. I went in there and the guy was complaining of a TR61 problem. I took a look at it and I pulled the air hose off the wall and water shot out. I'm like, I think I know what's going on here. So cleaned all that out, put a water trap in and a filter in, and replaced the head wheel. The machine came right up like it was supposed to. But that was scary to see that water shoot out of that spigot.
That never drained the compressor, and
They
hence all of the
Yeah, nothing in line, no filters.
Hence all of the traps and the little glass bulb things there at your supply line going
Yep.
to it. Yeah, I
Yep.
got it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen the compressors there that that never drained it, and you get oil and all kinds of junk in the. And I saw a compressor one time had about 12 inches of water in it one time. I mean, they never touched it, you know. But
Surprised
you
it
wouldn't
works.
think. It was just something we couldn't figure out something there. It wasn't hooked up to any videotape machines. It was for airlines in the building, but we were having problems and nobody ever thought to check the compressor. There was oil, and I don't know if we ever really did get it cleaned out well enough, but what a mess.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Mike out in LA, and I just wanted to mention I worked at a TV station starting in the late 60s, and everybody in the tape room and in the director's booth was smoking like crazy.
Yep.
And I was always amazed that things worked as well as they did. Because if you ever see pictures of control rooms and editing rooms or tape rooms there, everybody's lit up.
Well, and I know all I can speak about is ABC New York, and they would go crazy if you lit up in a tape room over there.
That's great. What years are you talking about that they would not let you do that? Because remember, there was smoking on airplanes well into the 70s.
Sure. Yeah. First time I was over at ABC was probably 71, 72.
Well, that's pretty progressive because of my station, like the last station I worked at, WTVT in Tampa, and I left there in 77. You know, it was Smoke City in there. And, you know, the smell of smoke when you walked in the building mixed with air conditioning always had that kind of familiar smell to it that you don't smell anymore.
Yeah. Well, they didn't have the same rules in the control room, so the production switchers were exposed to all that smoke.
I had a friend who was once at the switcher, and he had a can of Coke in his hand.
Oh,
and yeah, you know where this is going. And
yeah,
and so
we
he's
had
taking
that-
a sip, and he looks up, and there's a roach right on the corner of the can, and he, of course, threw the can, completely sprayed the switcher. They had to clean it out. Still worked. It was a Grass Valley.
Yeah, we had a Grass 300 in a facility, in an edit facility, that somebody did that too. They just knocked the can over, and they just filled the whole thing up with Coke. And I think we wound up actually replacing the control panel. I think it was just too much damage.
Thanks for allowing me in. I just got the dinner bell call, so see you next time.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of smoking in control rooms, it used to irritate me because I just don't want it around me. It just irritates me. But there was one DJ one time. You remember the old RCA 44s, the big ribbon mic? He used to blow smoke into it and stand back, and it looked like the microphone was smoking and all that. He thought he was being cute, you know.
That's yeah. Yeah, those microphones you see them on eBay, they're about $3,000 now.
I'm glad I've got about 15 of them in storage right now.
Well, that's you know what? That's your retirement.
I've been saving those things for over 50 years. I used to advertise in Antique Radio Classified years ago, and wanted microphones or wanted early televisions. And like they said, I was country before country was cool. Boy, I was advertising and say, "What do you want with those old microphones for?" And stuff. And I just like. And I took after like Bob Piquet, if you ever remembered him. He collected mics since 1950, and I had a chance to buy his collection. His son wanted me to have it, but I could have had it for over $300,000.
Oh,
But it was actually worth every penny. It was worth lots more. But I just thought 300,000. Well, it's going to take my savings and all of that. I better pass because I've got over 1,000 mics in my collection. And but what are you going to do? But anyway, that woman recording, I think up in Oregon, ended up with it. She's trying to retail all that stuff for astronomical prices. But anyway, it just irritated me when they go in there and abuse equipment like that. But he thought it was cute to watch a microphone look like it's a hot microphone. It's silly.
No idea what he was doing. Huh?
They had no idea, people. It's like I just don't get it.
If anybody wants to see any more of these machines, I can roll around here and if you're curious about anything.
What's
Hey,
the
Wayne.
early, what's the earliest Ampex you've got? You don't have their first one, do you?
Well, I got a VR1000 sitting over here,
Oh, okay.
which I showed the last time we had one of these meetings. Where is it? I don't know if you can see it. Let me get the mic off here and or the camera. You see it sitting over there?
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
see it.
Yep.
Where did
So-
it come from?
It was the first quad ever sold into New England. And it was purchased by the widow of the International Paper Company. And she donated it to the University of Maine. And one of the assistant professors there absconded with it, put it on his farmhouse porch, and ran it. I don't know what he was doing with it, but he had it running on his porch. And then the porch got enclosed, and he offered it to me. So I went up there and bought it. And I said, "How am I going to get this out of here?" He says, "Oh, I guess I'm going to have to take a wall down on this porch to get the machine out." So after 5 years, he did, and I got it and brought it down here in pieces.
What's its serial number? Do you know
Oh,
offhand?
I could go over and look at it and let you know if you're really
I'm just
curious.
How did they start their serial numbers back then?
Well, let me just say it's a 1000C. So it's the third
Generation.
generation. It's not going to have a low serial number. And unfortunately, it's a monochrome machine. It doesn't have the enhancements that were available at the time of the 1000C. It doesn't have an intersync. It doesn't have Amtech, although I have a few Amtech chassis around. I could put that in, but what I really need is the intersync, which is the servo that allows the machine to lock to a house sync generator.
You can put a 1200s intersync in if you really want to.
Oh boy.
if you're a glutton for punishment.
Chris, when I retire.
I'm amazed that it didn't have didn't come with an intersync. I thought on the C's they're pretty much doing that.
Yeah,
it must have been bare bones.
Yeah, it's a bare bones machine. I think it's, the woman that bought it for the university decided probably got the salesman in and said, "What's the cheapest machine you got?" And that's what it is.
Do you have many of those machines? I have one that they used on aircraft to show movies on aircraft.
What's that called? The 1100? No, the 1010 or something like that. It's the vertical. It's the vertical one.
This one, it lays down flat. And I wondered, do you have many of those in your collection or?
Nope.
The Ampex one, there was the 1100E and the 1200E, which looked like a TR5.
Yeah.
I saw a 1200E, but I never saw an 1100E.
Well, I got a pair of TR5, so I'm covered.
I had one of those too.
Yeah, I pulled them out of a chicken coop in Delmarva in Maryland.
Well, speaking of being on airplanes, you had the MPATI, which was the DC-6 that was flying around northern Indiana with VR1000 series type machines in it.
Yeah.
And then you had in Vietnam, you had the Army flying around with, I think they were TR3s or TR22s in it. So those are the two that I know of that were done that way.
How much power were they running out of that project?
I don't.
RF.
I don't know. The antenna was on a tilt; it would fold down, and I remember watching a program in high school. And then one of the guys that worked there went to U of M to the dental school, And so I got some information about that. But we won't talk about how long ago that was.
Yeah, I'd love to know about the RF part of that project.
Both of those I'd like to know. The one in Vietnam was on a Constellation, a Lockheed Constellation.
Oh, yeah.
That they were flying around. And I think it was in the RCA Broadcast News, they had a piece on that.
I've got all of those. I'll have to take a look. Interesting.
So John, did you ever have any good luck with any Chroma 80 Memorex tape, or is it all garbage?
It was all garbage.
I just had some I had to bake for 36 hours on EIAJ to get it to play back.
Yeah, if somebody walks in here with a roll of Chroma 80 for any tape format, I'm just like, goodbye. Turn around and walk out.
But I will agree with the comments on Fuji. Love Fuji tape when I get it in.
Yeah.
3M
mixed bag, yeah.
Mixed bag. 480 is pretty good.
Yeah.
I've had better luck with Ampex 196 1-inch than the 296.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yep.
And Humatic, forget it. 197 is awful. 187 is horrendous, and 197 was supposed to be better, and it really isn't. And then they just rebranded it for the people who are using it for the PCM systems, 467, and it's just as bad.
Same stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just that Chroma 80 happened when I was doing a really important project, and for the state of New York, and for the governor, and there's things like that you don't forget.
No, well, Cliff Benham told me a story once about Memorex. He was working at a station in Florida, and the Memorex rep came in, and they threw a reel on their brand new Ampex machine. I think it was a brand new 1200, and they ran it. It not only clogged, but it chipped ahead.
Oh.
Let's just say they rode him out on a rail and said, I don't know why that stuff exists. Why it ever got anywhere. It's just awful tape.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, we see it all. Now what's fun is the later Ampex and Quantigy stuff is garbage too.
Yeah, I don't see much of that.
The fun stuff is when you get what I've seen is on D2 and D1, the cassette shells are shrinking.
Ooh.
So you put them in the deck and they jam.
Whoa. Whoa.
Yeah, on a D1. I had some fun taking apart a D1 the other day because of that.
Yeah.
That was 2 hours of my day I want back.
Yeah, I get D1 in here once in a while. I've got the only D1s that I have that work right are the 1000. I've got a 2000, I've got a 2100, but they're not working. And I haven't had, again, it's all a matter of time. You know, I've got a payroll here.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I've seen stuff with now 3M, D1 and D2 tape has been fine. It plays back fine. Their Betacam stuff seems great. But the later Ampex and Quantigy Betacam,
not good.
They use the recycled shells where they weigh less than a VHS cassette.
Yeah.
It's like, guys, the cassette shell is part of the transport.
What was this value engineering that they did?
Oh, when I see those, I tell the client, I have to reshell these, and I put them in Sony shells, and they run just fine.
Yeah.
John, in all of your collection up there, do you have any cart machines like Umatics or anything like that?
No, but I have a pair of ACR 25s and an RCA 100. But they're out in the trailers because I've got no room in here for them. You know, if I shut the doors of this place and actually retire, I'll bring one of those ACRs in here. I've got one of them is from WBBM in Chicago, and and it's the original analog ACR 25. I also have an ACR 25B, which has it's more digital than the other ones. But basically, they're both the same physical size. They use the same carts. They use the Mark 20 head, the same heads in the AVR one. But the TCR 100 that I have, that was working when I put it in storage. The only thing wrong with it is I don't have, there's an accessory box that you need to use it called an SP 100. And I don't have one of those. What I do have is a TR70C, which has a mod kit that talks to the cart machine. So in order to use that, I got to set up the 70C next to the cart machine. It's like 6 30-amp circuits to fire the thing up to get it to work. So that hasn't been on my list of high priorities.
Here and there, when I'm out, at yard sales or whatever, I always like some of the early Michoud stuff, the piano key VHS tapes.
Oh, yeah.
And they're becoming collectible now, but the most interesting one I have, back in 1981, Magnavox was based here in Knoxville, Tennessee, their world headquarters. And Greenville, where they produce their TV sets up there and such. Well, in Westtown Shopping Mall here in West Knoxville, back in 1981, Magnavox filled up all of the corridors of that shopping center, of that shopping mall, with Magnavox products.
Wow.
Now, this is 1981, and they had one of those Michusta, RCA, it had dozens of different badges on it. But they had a Magnavox piano key there with a plexiglass case on it. And I thought that was the neatest thing that I'd ever seen. Now, this is 1981, and I said, boy, I'd sure like to have that. Well, a friend of mine, Joe Zonin, that lives here in Knoxville, and there's many others here in Knoxville that used to work there, and they're retired now. But I was telling Joe about that machine one day. He says, I have that machine. He was chief engineer of high voltage deflection there.
Wow.
And he had all kinds of stuff. And I said, you have that plexiglass VHS tape? He says, I got it. He says, well, you can have it he says, I think I know where it is. It belongs to my wife, really. But anyway, every once in a while I'd remind him of it. But one day he gave me a call. He says, come over here and come get it. And I cleaned it up, and it's gorgeous, but it's got a plexiglass case, and it was demonstration only, for Magnavox from 40 some years ago. That's one of my prized possessions, stuff like that. One of the early ones.
Julian, did you ever see their other product that they did? The Plato,
Odyssey.
the Plato educational terminals that they did with the University of Illinois. They were made by Magnavox, and they're basically, it's a computer terminal, but there's a microfiche projector inside of it, controlled by the computer, and it has a transmissive screen on the back, and it shoots through and overlays through a gas plasma display the computer text on top of pre-prepared graphics, and it was all made so it could work over a 1200 baud line back in 79 or so.
I remember something about it, but I think those were custom ordered, if I remember. Now, I've got some early stuff that some engineers designed when they were doing their Odyssey and gaming equipment. I've got some really neat advertising from the late 70s there that's unobtainable now, that I just found a stash of it. There was a guy that lived here in Knoxville that they had an estate sale, and I found a bunch of stuff in there that he had that you just don't see anymore. It's long since gone, but they used to have a television, like a 19-inch color TV, had some Molex plugs on the back of it in the upper corner, 2 of them, that you put a controller on it, and you'd play Pong on it and stuff like that. That's another thing that they made. They also made burglar alarm systems for your house. And I have one of those that I found. But there's a Magnavox museum up in Greenville, Tennessee. It's about 35, 40 miles north east of Knoxville. and they've got some interesting stuff. And I thought I'd donate some of that stuff to them. And it's the only Magnavox museum that there is that, because Greenville is their manufacturing plant where they put TVs together. I remember they had a news thing on the Channel 6, 6 o'clock news, talking about manufacturing TVs up in Greenville. And when they're showing them manufacturing them, there were these cartons going out of there that said Curtis Mathis on it. Those big screens and stuff, because they contract marketed a lot of stuff. And, GE, RCA, and Magnavox made stuff for Sears. They made it for Bradford. Let's see, who did Bradford? Was that big outfit? And J.C. Penney. J.C. Penney used RCA, and JVC made some stuff. I used to do a lot of that stuff. They traded a lot back then.
Curtis Mathis also used NEC a lot.
Yes, those were, and actually I worked on hundreds of there was an outfit in Lenore City that sold Curtis Mathis sets, and I'd go buy their trade-ins, and I was the TV man at the local flea market, which was in its heyday there. And I used to just love those. And I had a picture tube rebuilding plant that I helped, that belonged to Paul Mercer. I worked for him on Saturday morning, so I'm well versed in building picture tubes. But anyway, I used to, all they needed was new tubes in them. And I made a lot of money, selling Curtis Mathis sets. But one thing about, I have some other engineering samples. I've got some flybacks that were cast in clear lucite that they were using for experimental. I've got, and Magnavox would buy other products, like Hitachi or something. Hitachi, when they were selling their little 12-inch black and white click stop sets, it would come with an owner's manual that had about 15, 20 pages in it. And I have one of those that one of the engineers up there, he type wrote on it, and said, how come here's a $99.95 set that they're selling, and it comes with an elaborate owner's manual, and we have like a little something like made in a copier machine, and I've got some relics and stuff like that. But Curtis Mathis, they used a lot of, what was it, Hitachi? You could go buy a Hitachi 12-inch black and white for $99.95, or you could go to Curtis Mathis, and it was the same TVs. I mean, identical, just rebadged with Curtis Mathis. It was like $300. And I have some Curtis Mathis advertising with a couple of old movie stars on it. And they were offering trade-in on your old TV set. Regardless of what it was, you trade it in. And I've got this picture. It says, trade in this TV. It's older than he is, just stuff like that. But Curtis Mathis, they did make their cabinets down in Texas, but they used NEC chassis, and they were actually good sets. I enjoyed working on them. That 51 chassis and the 53, very easy to troubleshoot, modular, and I made a lot of money with those sets. And those days.
I remember seeing a commercial that they did, had to be in 81 or so, where if you bought a Curtis Mathis set here locally in Youngstown, you got a free Atari VCS. So if you bought a Curtis Mathis television, you got a free $100 Atari to give to your kids for Christmas.
I think that was regional, that they would do stuff like that.
Yeah,
they had a lot of.
That was in Youngstown, Ohio. So yeah,
they used to heavily advertise Curtis Mathis, say it's very expensive, but darn well worth it, because they give you a 5-year warranty on the tube and 3 years or something like that. But boy, you sure paid for it. You could buy an RCA for, say, $500, but a Curtis Mathis would be 7 or 8. And they had elaborate cabinets with, 8 tracks in it and everything. But I used to get a bunch of those, and they sold really well. They would outsell my RCA stuff or anything because they were so heavily advertised. But, marketing's everything.
In that case, I'd take an RCA, XL100. I thought those were great sets.
I love those sets. I have pretty much every early XL100 that they made. I have some that look like they're brand. In fact, I do have one that's still new in the box, unopened.
And I grew up with a CTC 40. That was our set.
Yeah,
Grandpa
that was
bought
a,
it, and that was a nice set. And
that was an interesting set. Very odd too, by the way.
oh yeah, it ate some SCRs every now and then in the horizontal section, and but it was overall that one lasted until the 90s for us, till the tube was just totally shot.
Back in the early 70s, when they were heavily marketing RCA XL 100s, all of a sudden they came out with a CTC 39. It was all tubes. And we suspect they were using up old parts. Now, this is 1974 when XL 100s were 3 or 4 years into their marketing. And anyway, this set was just all tubes. And I think it was like a leader model or just getting rid of old stock. But, you know, your tire store, Firestone Tires would sell them in their place, you know, but they weren't bad sets and all of that. But that CTC 40, that was a very unusual set that they made. Then they came out with that Astro 2000. They made 2,000 of them. They cost $2,000. And if you bought one of those, you'd send a little brass plaque in there and they'd engrave your name on it, custom made for, you know, your name on it. Yeah, it's just interesting. But, you know, getting back to videotape, I was amazed. I went up to Michigan at the Radio Fest up there, and this guy had 2 VCRs, a format that I have never seen before. They were cartridge, and it was different from that Motorola that they came out with and that other one. Can't think of names right off the bat, but this guy had 2 of them. And I tried to buy them, but he wanted a lot of money for them. And I found out that one of them was sold for $5 in their auction, but I'd left before that, so I was looking for those. But there were 2 formats I've never seen before in a home use set.
Was it the Quasar Great Time Machine?
No, they weren't quasars, although I'm looking for a quasar. That's the one I was trying to think of. They had a real odd format. But this guy had 2 machines, and I mean, they weren't had nothing to do with quasar or a VHS or beta or anything. They were just an entirely different format. And I have in my collection, I think I got them from Jeffrey Bourne there. I've got 2 or 3 videotape machines that are made in 1971. And they're kind of, I have to dig one of those out and show that one time. Very odd, and has the drum on that thing. It's just, I can't describe it. It's just so oddball. And I think I have a tape for one of them. But there were a lot of people experimenting with that stuff back then.
It's not a cartridge vision, is it?
Be honest with you, I don't know. I haven't looked at them in years. I know where they're sitting.
Because
but I need to
that was one odd head drum, if you ever saw it, because the preamp was on the head drum and there were 3 heads because it was a triple skip field. So it would record one field and then play it back 3 times, which is awful for color. They were an awful machine. The controls were in a horrible place when they put it in the TV it was meant to go in, because they were developed on workbenches, so all the controls were at the bottom. And then if you slide into the set, you're working on it on the bottom on the floor.
I'll tell you what, if I can remember it, it's over at my what I call the dental lab. It's one of my storage facilities that's stuffed full of everything. I'll dig one of those out, or the better one of it. It kind of stands upright rather than laying down flat. I'll dig one up, either get pictures of it, or I'll present it on one of our next talk shows here next month. But it's just a real odd machine that I've never seen before.
You know, that's the fun thing about all this early video stuff, and me and John and all these guys who deal with this every day. Now, every company thought they had a better mousetrap.
Oh, yeah.
And they kept throwing ideas at the wall and seeing what would stick. And it's amazing to see what all was out there. And what
I've got a Sony Betamax, the first model that they made, that's still brand new in the box, just about. It was either a sales display, or anyway, it was unsold. But it was their first beta machine. Boy, it weighs a ton too.
That's one of the arguments that some people made that why beta failed was they cost more to ship too. But no, what happened was the Koreans came in and licensed to VHS and then just started blowing them out. And like you could get them for $2.99 by 1986, and then the race was on. I mean, but we have nothing on what Philips would do overseas. Philips kept throwing formats at the wall, and they kept making formats. And luckily, we never saw them over here. We never saw.
The only reprieve that Sony ever had in the Betamax was when they started making a broadcasting. It was a robotic machine that would store 100 of those tapes or something, and they were all barcoded.
And well, they made two machines. They made the original one was called Beta Cart, and it held it had 5 players in it, which were just modified BBW 10s that side loaded. And then they had a I forget how many cartridges you could put in that thing, but CBS New York used it to delay Letterman for a while, so that it had followed after the local news guys were finished, and they just put the thing into a repeat mode, and it just kept loading up cartridges. And then after that they built another machine called the LMR, which was a very large machine. It used D2 machines, and that's what a lot of stations used for on air, because it was much more rugged than the Beta Carts.
And then they did the last one, which was the Flexicart, which you could get with different bins for VHS.
It was a large machine. If you remember those photo booths that you'd see at carnivals, they were about as big as one of those, but you couldn't go inside of it. You had like a little mailbox thing that you'd put it in. The robot would retrieve it, and it would mark it and dock it somewhere that it had it would find it if you programmed it.
They barcoded those tapes.
They barcoded it. They had a PC scheduler that ran on a program on DOS, and at our one local station, when they got one of those in, one of the first engineers, he quit because he could not figure that machine out, and he hated it, and he hated but that man, they said he knew anything about a quad you could ever figure out, but he just couldn't wrap his head around the Betacams at all. And of course, they went to Betacam for news, because that station went from 3/4 inch straight to Betacam.
Yep. Yeah.
What I really, really liked here in Knoxville, Channel 8 had a TC100. It had those 2-inch quad. And the most amazing thing, and John, you'll know this, that machine fascinates the crap out of me, because it would take that cartridge and it wouldn't extract the tape. It would blow the tape out of the cartridge, and it looked like it was going to destroy the tape. And it'd just blow it, and it'd load up, and it'd load up another one, have a backup that there wouldn't be a gap between them. And then it would reel the tape back in, but it would blow the tape out of the cartridge. And they never gave any trouble. But there was one here in Knoxville.
I don't know about that.
Well, they may have done that, but there was one here in Knoxville, and without my knowledge, something happened to it. Nobody knows what happened to it. And I could have had it, I think. But I'm looking for a TC1. I want a TC100 in my collection. That's got to be the most fascinating videotape machine ever invented. How that thing actually worked.
Yeah, well, if you had to be really careful with it, because it didn't have any pinch rollers, and one of the big problems with it was the cap stands would glaze over, and then the tapes wouldn't run right, and all kinds of. If the tape doesn't run right, all kinds of stuff happens. But the big problem with the TCRs was the guys that went behind it with a flashlight, because the whole thing was driven with photoelectric cells and detectors in the back. So you go behind it and open the doors and stick a light in there, and that was the end of it. You'd have to actually shut it down and power it back up, because you'd put it in such a strange mode. It was all DTL logic. The whole top of that machine was full of these little boards that were direct, DTL, and there was no microprocessor. So if you put these things in a funny position, they didn't know how to recover, and it would just wreck the tapes.
You don't have one, do you?
Yeah, yeah,
You have one?
yeah. I have a TCR.
You know where I could ever find one? You know of any strange ones out there?
The best thing to do is look for an NBC affiliate, because they're the guys that had them. That's why I got my ACR. My ACRs came from CBS because all the CBS stations used ACRs. The TCRs, ABC New York had TCRs. Not for long. They got beta carts as soon as they could. CBS
A
New
lot
York,
cheaper.
yeah, CBS New York replaced the ACRs with the Sony, the LMRs, the big LMR machines. And my oldest son had the distinct pleasure of replacing them with servers. So,
Well, one of the things about the TCR 100s was all those plug-in boards with the ICs on them, TTL audio, everything. Well, you can swap these boards. No, because there were time differences going through a board, and it would just crash if you did that.
I saw that logic section in one of those, and it looks so much like an old DEC PDP-8 with their flip chips, and it was pretty much the same design. But Julian, I got a great story about the TCR 100. I knew an engineer at WKBN Youngstown, and they had the first TCR in Youngstown. They also had the first VTR. They wanted to be the first with everything in Youngstown to beat their old competitor, WFMJ. But what happened was someone in the marketing department brought in the press, and they started taking flash photography of the thing with it on air. And they were
done that.
They soon called Camden because that machine freaked out in such a way it broke quite a few parts in the machine, and they had to call RCA Camden, and I think they said it took the guy about 3 days to get it back on the air.
Yeah. Yeah, the Ampex machine didn't have that kind of a problem, but it did have a large roller in the middle of the transport cabinet, and you'd load it 4 cartridges at a time, but it was very dangerous. It had tremendous motor on it, and it would take your hand off if you weren't careful. So the idea behind the ACRs was to stay away from the back of them and keep the back panel, keep the back doors closed.
John, is there any truth to on the ACR of the 25s that if you told it to not rewind a cart, that it could run 10-second spots back to back?
Oh yeah, yeah. It would. You had to set it up a certain way to do that, but it would take even a 6-minute cart, which was the longest time you could put on that machine. It would rewind a 6-minute cart and unload it and load a new one and be ready to go before the 10 seconds were out. It was amazing to watch that happen. But everything, it was like one of those things. Everything's got to be just right. The machine's got to be perfectly lined up, and you got to have an engineer at the facility who knows what he's doing, who's been to school on it, who makes sure that everything is in good shape, because that's the only way you're going to do it. The RCAs would not do that. They wouldn't do a 10-second back to back. But the Ampexes would, and they would do it random. You could have any combination of those 24 cartridges programmed in, and it would play them back to back, 10 seconds apart. Yep.
The amazing thing is that was all non-microprocessor controlled. Somebody actually designed all the logic of it, and they made it work.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just mind-blowing to think about that.
Well, I look at the the servo on the Ampex 1200, the VR 1200 we got at work. It's, and that is completely all transistor-based logic. It's all made with germanium transistors, which are all failing and getting leaky because all of those TI transistors are going bad.
Uh-oh.
Because the TIs aren't hermetically sealed. The 2N1303s and 1304s, which they are all over those things, they're all going bad because they're not hermetic.
That must be an old 1200 because they went to integrate. You talk about the intersync. They went to solid state or integrated circuits around, I think, -09 or something like that.
Yeah, the servo. Yeah,
Yeah, it's in the intersync. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all, I figured probably 200 transistors in that lot.
Yeah.
And they're dated 68, 69.
Yeah,
But
I got a VR2000 that's like that. I've also got a 2000B that has the updated intersync, and it just works great.
And then we have an AVR1 at work, and it's having issues with the 4000 series logic, because if you're not careful with that early 4000 series logic, you'll blow it all up because it was so static sensitive.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I found with the ACR and operating it was the claws would break sometimes that pull the carts back and forth on the trombone, or the rubber tires that were the wine, they'd smoke and melt. And that would be, oops, we're in tests.
Yeah, those pucks that were at the bottom of each transport, they were critical. If those pucks got to wear a little bit, the cartridge wouldn't be lined up just right, and you'd have all kinds of trouble. Yeah.
We had two ACRs at Channel 2 in Detroit, and one goes into test, start going the other one, it went into test.
Oh,
we're in trouble going into the 6 o'clock balloon.
Goodbye.
It was quick, try to get one working, but couldn't do the open, it was uncut.
Yeah.
John, do you have the unfortunate of having any M2 gear there?
I have one M2 machine just because I wanted to have one. It works, but I've never had occasion to use it for anything. I look at it, it's sort of one of those things that I just like, it's there, stay away.
Yeah. Oh, I feel the same every time I get a D3 tape.
Well, I've had very good, I've got lots of D3s and I got tons of D5 machines. Never had a problem with them, although I did have the newest one, the 3700. The down converter board stopped working, and the machine was under warranty. So I drove it down to Panasonic, which used to be right near me here, and I looked at it and I said, "What's going on with this?" Oh, the capacitors. So one of their technicians replaced like 150 electrolytics on the down converter board, and I'm like, "Gee, and what if this is going to happen to the rest of the machine?"
Yes.
That machine it was $100,000 VTR.
Every Panasonic machine, I'm checking off the list of ones that work one day and don't work the next because the capacitors are all going bad.
And they make the capacitors are Panasonic capacitors, aren't they?
Well, there's a thing about that. They found out because bean counters are involved, and the cost engineer got involved somewhere, and they were buying counterfeit Panasonic capacitors from a distributor who was saying that they were real Panasonic capacitors. But yeah, it gets real interesting. We have a couple of the just the AG 1980s for VHS, and those will work one day and then not the next because the TBCs are all getting all full of bad surface mount. And someone asked, well, how long is that going to take you to fix? I said, well, there's about 500 surface mount capacitors in there. You want to take me off of production for a couple days? Cool.
Those capacitors were made, Panasonic capacitors were made right here in Knoxville, Tennessee. Forks of the River, Panasonic had a Matsushita up. They manufactured speakers and capacitors only. I don't think they're there anymore. By the way, John, do you ever keep up with any of those boys up there in Woonsocket, Rhode Island up there?
Oh, sure.
You down there. Are any of them on the net here tonight, or did they ever come in? Or
well, I think Chuck was on here earlier. I saw him, and he's part of the gang. And I had an email from Jay Ballard. He said he was going to attend, so he might have been on here, but I don't see him.
I didn't see him here tonight, but I like them up here. I went up there. They had some stuff up there. Said if I didn't get it, they're gonna throw it out or scrap it. So I can't bear to see that happen. So I drove my truck up there. They were very good to me up there. I mean, they're a wonderful bunch up there. The only thing I've got a RCA TK1, that monoscope camera.
Oh,
They've
yeah.
got one up there, and Jay Ballard.
He's got about 3 of them. Jay's got a
Yeah.
whole pile of those.
I know. I was wanting him if he'd give me some help with mine because I want to get mine running. And just like they have a roll around, cart. I mean, a equipment rack there, and I've got all the stuff to do it with WP16 power supplies, but I want to know what's on that tube on it, if it's custom made or a generic. And I've got another. I don't know if you call it the monoscope tube itself. I've got another one. I want to know what's on it, if it was a custom or.
Well, you know what?
Bring him to the museum.
Take him up to me Woonsocket, and Jay will put him in one of his scanners for you.
Yeah, or just bring him into the ETF next time you're up. I was swapping tubes on the museum's monoscope camera. Because they have three of them. They have that custom CBS one. They have a standard Indian head and another one. And yeah, it's not hard to swap those tubes and get them producing a decent picture if they're not completely toasted, which they might be, but you'll get to see something.
Well, Jay Ballard on his TK1 up there, he had an interesting problem in it. They finally figured it out. The power transformer in it was arcing internally, and they just got it rewound. But I'd like to, I could go through it myself, but I'd like to get somebody that's had a little more experience that, that they have an ability to set it up, perhaps.
Well,
I'd like to get that thing shopped out.
Jay ran the NBC network laboratory for about 30 years. And then he went over and ran the ABC lab for another 10. So he's the right guy to do that.
I've been trying to get him. He says, "Oh, I've got too much to do up here." Here's a case where money doesn't talk,
No.
He's a good one. I sure would like to get him on it. And
Jay's a good one, and so's George Lemaster. George is good.
I'm tempted to go up there and put it on their doorstep and ring the doorbell and run, say, "Take care of this baby." Fix me.
Yeah, but, George would be good. George could help you, and he's on here. He was on here tonight.
Yeah, George is helping me with the 1200s at work. He's got some ideas of how to replace all those germaniums with silicon. So I've been talking with him on that, because I'm not paying $15 a pop for a transistor that's probably still going to be bad.
Yeah, all you're doing is pushing the problem down the road.
And yes, I could get it from NTE, but NTE tells me one transistor sub for 100. So,
yeah.
Now I've got several thousand new old stock RCA SKs and some ECGs and some Motorola HEPs there. I've got a bunch of them. If there's anything you might be looking for that you can't find, they're all in boxes and stuff, but if I can get a number on it, maybe I can.
I'll have to see the cross, because it's the 2N1303 and 1304, the pair that's used. They're just used as switches in the inner sync. So it's all in the servo. It's making what would be a digital servo out of transistors, because you build a computer out of transistors. So, and at least their circuit boards, they didn't use crappy circuit boards like some companies did.
Yeah, boy, you're lucky.
So you say up there at ETF, I can bring one of those monoscope tubes up there. They've got the ability to fire it up.
You know what? Give Paul Beck a call, because he manages the place. And he's very influential, and he could probably commandeer Jay or George. And George spends a lot of time up there. So he can probably commandeer some time for you to get your monoscope tubes checked.
Yep, and like you said, if you can't by the time May comes around and the convention comes around, pack them good, bring them with you. Yeah, I can put them in the camera at the ETF, and then we can get a picture on that little Sony monitor and get you a nice, see what's on them.
Oh, I'd like that. A bunch of years back on eBay, there was a guy in Russia selling monoscope tubes. Has that long, thin neck on that thing. I mean, a real weird one. And he had a picture of it, of what kind of a picture it would develop. Well, at the time, it was like $69. And I thought, well, I have to have one of those. But the tube is very, very delicate. The neck on that thing is about almost the diameter of a fat pencil, and it's long. And this is in Russia now that has to be shipped over here. And I asked the guy on
Good
several
luck with
occasions.
that.
Well, I asked the guy several times. I said, "Can you pack this thing enough that it'll survive the trip to the United States?" He assured me that he could. Well, I went ahead and bought it, and darn if he didn't, I got it, you know. But they're not $69 from Russia anymore. Now he wants like 1,500 for the same thing. He must have found a stash of them over there. But at least I've got one in my collection.
That's good.
Well, I'll bring I'll bring this TK1 up there with me, and I'll bring that other tube, and let's see what we can do with it. But man, I sure would like to put it in some good hands and let him. I'd pay him to do it, you know, just make sure it got chopped out correctly. And but that's got to be the most interesting thing that you can ever do in a museum, is show that Indian head test pattern.
Yeah.
And especially if it's got a custom tube in it. That
Yeah.
I'd like to see.
Yeah, you might be, maybe it's a local Knoxville TV station. You never know.
Well, I was at a ham fest up in Indianapolis, and I was just yakking away at my table there, and some guys were around it. And this guy just walks up to me and says, "You're looking for a monoscope camera?" He says, "Well, I have one." He said, "And also, I had an RCA TM21, you know, the 21-inch round tube color monitor. I lost it in a fire, and I was looking for another one.
300 pounds. Yeah.
They're heavy. Well, I lost one. I had a nice one in the fire that was in the fire that I had. Well, anyway, he said, "You know, I have an RCA monitor." Now I said, "Now, is this a TV set or is this specifically a studio monitor?" "Oh, it's a studio monitor." And of all the crazy things, he only lived like 2 miles away from the fairgrounds up there. And he said, "Well, he'll be home around 12 o'clock. Well, I showed up at his doorstep. You could have set your watch by it, you know. And he took me in there, and I said, "Oh my gosh, it's a real TK1. And
Wow.
it's a real RCA TM." And he had a bunch of other stuff. He said, "I just want to get this junk out of here, and I just wanted all of that." He wanted to get, I gave him $100 anyway, but he wanted to just get rid of it. I just couldn't believe that, you know. So anyway, I lucked out, and man, I just about had to tie my wife to the roof because that TM21's and all that. I said, "That's coming home with me." And I was in my little Nissan Versa at the time. But anyway, I had to come back again and come pick the rest of the stuff up. But yeah, my wife just barely escaped from being tied to the roof on that car.
By the way, Jay Ballard's probably the sole living expert on that monitor. He's restored a whole pile of them.
TM21?
Yep.
I also have a TM10. That's the 15-inch monitor. And believe it, yeah, TM10. That's the 15-inch with that 15 GP22 in it. And I have a real nice one. And what was the name? Johnson up in Chicago. He supposedly restored it. Anyway, I let it go. Gustafson got it from me, but when he died, I bought it back for about 3 times what I sold it for from the collection there, but I got it back. The only thing I didn't get back was the TM for it, but somebody on eBay had a manual for, you know, the original book for it. So I found that. So I've got stuff backing. So I've got the TM10, the TM21, and I've got an old 1952 Dodge Root van that had a TV that belonged to Doug, what's a big television station? I can't remember names late at night. It was, they used it for the Chicago baseball team. The soccer.
Is it WGN?
WGN. It was an original 1952 van that they used to televise the baseball team up there in Chicago. And then it went to Minnesota up there, and then it stayed at somebody's farm up there. Some college, it was donated to a college, and they found out how difficult it was to use. So they sold it. Anyway, I got it. It's rusty, but it's got 4 complete CCU units for TK11 cameras.
Wow.
And I've got, it has a Western Electric radio board in it, which I took it out because that's a valuable thing in itself.
Yeah.
But I got a lot of-
25s. Yeah.
I've I got a bunch of, if you ever get down this way, you need to stop by here. I've got enough to keep you guys busy for hours.
Yeah.
If you
My
ever get
wife's
down there.
family's from Knoxville. I should take a ride down there with her. She'd probably love it.
Oh, what's stopping you?
Time, just time. Everything is time.
Well, if you
I
get
went to
anybody up
Knoxville.
there gets down to
Mhm.
Knoxville, make sure I know you're coming or something. And I've got a bunch of stuff and stuff that I can't even display because it's packed away in my dental lab or somewhere else.
Yeah.
I've got WLWT Cincinnati. I've got their first TK41.
Wow.
And
Oh,
I've got 3 TK41s and I have, here we go with names again. I bought it at the auction at the early television that belonged to, what's his name there? Ed Rattan. I got his TK40 and I've
Oh
got
boy.
that. I have that.
It's a gold mine, that thing.
If they only made 25 of those,
Yep.
this one's serial number 508, which means it was number 8 of 25 made for CBS in Studio City. I've got WLWT in Cincinnati. I've got their first TK41. And I have, I've got everything. I've got TK42s. I have TK43s, 44s. I have them all. And,
Yeah, I had about 10 of those cameras. I had 44s, 45s, 46s. And I gave them all to the museum up in Woonsocket. And I had PEDs. I had nice pedestals and heads to go with them. So Paul came down here with a truck one day. I just loaded them up to take it off.
Wow.
Well, how much? You've seen all these tape machines I've got in here, and I've got twice as many more out in the trail. I got trailers out in the back here, and 2 trailers out here, and a trailer in the front, and a half trailer in the front. And the trailer in the front's got the TCR in it, and a TR70B, a TR70C, an Ampex ESS2, which is a solid state real-time recorder, all kinds of stuff. And the console version of this thing. I got 2 of them out there.
You're preaching to the choir here. Well, when I went up to Woonsocket, they gave me those Philips cameras that belonged to the Boston Pops up there. They didn't have any special love for them. And
no,
he also gave me a microscope to, to look at the heads on a quad machine. Like I said, those guys up there really good to me. And
yep.
I just loaded my car right on my truck up there at the time. And now
I gave him a bunch of stuff too. I gave him a bunch of Tektronix scope stuff and Grass Valley and extenders and other things that I don't have a need for it.
Hey, John, do you have any of the other HDVS gear? Do you have any of the production gear like cameras or anything like that? Or
I have a pair. I've got a pair of the HDC 100s, which I had at Belcor years ago. I've got an HDC 500, which I got from CR, who's a Louisiana guy. And let me think, what else?
Does anyone know what happened to Barry Rebo's stuff? He had just about everything.
Well, I know, but here's the thing with those guys, him and Niles, a lot of that stuff wasn't owned by them. When Niles started working in the field, Sony was looking for a couple of guys that had some good creative talent to use their equipment. So there was a hush-hush placement of stuff. So I don't know how much of that stuff, because I know down at Belcor we had 8 1-inch analog machines and 3 cameras and 2 switchers and all kinds of stuff. And every time we did a job, we hired Niles to do a lot of work for us. And every time he came, he used our gear. And I'm like, David, where's your stuff? Oh, it's tied up.
Okay.
So,
So
but
yeah.
that stuff, both of those guys, I think, well, they were very lucky. First of all, they were very talented at what they did. And second of all, they did Sony a big favor by using their equipment to create content. But, think about it. Think about the cost of that stuff. I mean, I walked into Sony years ago with a Belcorp purchasing agent, and we bought 4 machines at $180,000 a piece and wrote him a check. You think David had the money to do that? Nope.
Do you know who would have done the conversions for the stuff that they did? Because they did stuff like music videos that were then down converted to NTSC for distribution. Do you know who would have done that, or what?
Well, I did a little bit of it. I've got a bunch of those tapes here. But David had it was called an HDL 500, I think. It was a Sony down converter. It was the size of a mini refrigerator. It was huge. We didn't go that way. We went with Snell, because Snell was making those things, and they were, 4 rack units. They weren't too bad. Now it's a chip. But I don't know. Those guys, they sort of disappeared. I haven't heard from Barry in probably 20 years, and every once in a while, someone from Niles will call me and want me to do some compression work for him, which we did. We've done a lot of compression work. I don't know. I don't know where they are.
Okay, because John, I may contact you off of here, because I know some people are actually looking for the HD masters of some of that stuff.
Yeah, well, I can look. I mean, I got a library full of those tapes. I could check and see what I got in there. I have no idea. I just pulled a tape out tonight and stuck it on that digital machine here, and it's got a history of Elvis Presley on it. I never knew, and it was done by NHK.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting you talk about equipment. I had a stolen TR-60, serial number 6005. We bought, it had been originally in Jacksonville, in Illinois, I think it was. And the station went dark. They had leased the stuff from RCA, and somebody came in and they were borrowing the equipment, taking it out, doing remotes, bringing it back, taking it out, doing remotes. And they sold it to us, unbeknownst to us. We assume nobody steals it.
But it was stolen, huh? Wow.
And RCA, it didn't work. So RCA gets called in. They got it working. 4, 5, 6 months later, RCA calls up and says, "We want our machine back." What?
Yeah.
They lost the court case because they abandoned it, basically.
Wow.
Yeah, it ended up at Ohio State in Columbus.
Yeah, there's 4 TR-60s here. I'm looking at one over here, and there's one in the back and one up here, and one in.
I saw the TR-60 with no monitors, no scope.
Well, that's the junker. But I've got 3 other ones that are in really good shape. If you want to see them, I guess I could roll the rack over there and show it to you.
Oh, this was a bare bones machine. It didn't have a KVAC, didn't have an editor.
Oh, I got everything in mind. Let me roll this over and I'll show you the one.
It had so many SK and HEP transistors in it that it was flaky. And after I got those replaced with original parts, it worked reliably.
Yeah, the only problem I had with mine were the new Vistors in the preamp. I never even knew there were tubes in there. Then one day I found out.
There were tubes?
There's tubes in that machine. Yep.
Yep, new Vista preamps. Yep.
I thought the preamp was something else. Okay, yeah, that's a 60.
Yep. So if you take the head out and take the preamp out,
and you pull the preamp, yeah,
there's tubes in there. Here, I'll show you one. I got one right here. Here's a spare preamp, and here they are. I don't know if you can see them.
Oh, the Vistors, yeah.
Every darn.
Yep, 4 of them.
The 2000s used new Visitors in their preamps too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I
this,
collect.
This is spare. This works fine.
I also collect movie cameras. I have Jack Webb's Mitchell camera, and I needed a lens, and I needed a lens for it. And there was a guy down in South Carolina that collected movie cameras, had the largest collection, I think, in the world. And I went down there, and he had 4 RCA TK70s down there, or I mean TR70s, 4 of them. But I looked at every one of them, and the quad head was missing on every one of them.
Of course.
I kind of wanted one of them and all that, but he's since passed away some years back, and I don't know what happened to that stuff. But man, he had a warehouse, but like your building. And I mean, he didn't have 1 or 2 of it. He had like a bay, a parking bay that was full of that one particular, you know, tripods and heads and cameras and lenses.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'd like to know what happened to his TR70s.
Grass Valley 300.
Not that one. This is a Calypso, or what we like to call Collapso.
Okay, sorry.
I have a 300. It's in the other room. It was the last one that came out of ABC New York. And we used it for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire show. And when the show moved out, the president of engineering, who was Ken Michaels at the time, said, "Hey, you interested in that 300?" I said, "I'd love to have it." So the SMAG guys, which are the NABET craft guys that do most of the work, one of them called me up and said, "Hey, look, we're going to take that switcher out for you, and we're not going to sawzall the cables. We're going to unplug them, because when they demolish stuff at the network, they don't take any time to do it. They just take a sawzall, go to the bottom of the racks, and cut everything." So because that happened to me in Atlanta at the Olympics. We had some stuff down there that needed to be saved, and by the time we went out for dinner and came back after the final closing ceremonies, cables were all cut. So anyway, I got that 300 sitting in my conference room out front. Haven't fired it up yet, but one of these days.
A beautiful switcher.
Yes, it is.
John, that's standard operating procedure when they go to scrap stuff. It's not just in broadcast. I saw it with stuff that you wouldn't believe, the largest deck vac system, the VAX 9000, when they pulled it out of where was it? Rockwell. That's what they did. They hacksawed the cables between the cabinets.
What a shame, huh?
Yeah, and you're not gonna put that back together because it's all special coax was made, because that thing uses a 6-phase clock.
Yeah.
Here in Knoxville, Channel 22 there went all digital some years back, and they were going to take out everything that they had that was analog. And they told me, you can't cherry pick or anything. You either take it all or none at all. And I said, well, that's fine. Well, I went over there and I thought, well, I'm going to have to pull all this stuff out. I got about 12 cabinets, a control board, a video. I think it's a Grass Valley, and got it all. But what they'd done is gone in there and they just went through and cut all the wires to everything, just chopped them. And they were all little like phone connectors. All you got to do is pinch them and pull them. And nope, they went through and got everything. But
got them all.
Yeah, it was all sitting out there in the front porch for me out there. And
that's too bad. It's too bad that happened.
So, John, which 1-inch C machine do you like the best?
Which machine?
Which 1-inch C format machine?
C format?
Yeah.
I gotta say I'm partial to the VPR3. It's just an elegantly designed machine. Although, like anything else, there are issues with it. In fact, I'm going to rewind this BCN while I'm standing over here. Yeah, I'm not a Sony guy. If I had my druthers, it'd be all Ampex.
I found that the Ampex VPR2s were easier to maintain than the Sony BVHs because of the way that they did the entrance guides. The Sonys could take you a whole day to get that lined up just right if you had to change the scanner,
Yeah, you ought to try
if you're
lining up-
lucky.
You should try lining up this high def stuff.
And there's an AVR1.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Oh yeah, and if you want real fun, you know those 3000 series Sonys and their capacitors, because they all have Elna capacitors in
Yeah, I've
that
heard
just
that.
leak all over the boards.
Really?
Yep. And they use that nice high temperature solder. that,
Oh, so
that-
it's hard. So when you melt the solder off, you wreck the boards?
yeah, unless you use a solder, I use a soldering alloy to get
Yeah.
it down to something, because those capacitors, they melt the bottom seal out of the capacitor, so you got that all mess. They're not fun machines to work on, and those capacitors are everywhere, including on the motherboard. This
Well,
in the middle of the machine.
Yeah, well, you know that those EV machines, the one I showed you earlier, they're also like that. And the Panasonic's the same way. It's just very, very hard to troubleshoot. And I mean, boards are all folded together underneath the machine. It's almost impossible to troubleshoot the darn things. These things, everything's plug-in, and as long as you have the extenders on them, you can do anything with them. Nope. Better figure this out here. Okay.
Yeah, I know with the Bosch machines that Compact Video had used specially modified ones to do that image vision system that they had, that I think it was 655 line
Yep. Yeah.
system. But the only thing I've ever seen that was done in that was credited with that was Monty Python Live at the Hollywood Bowl. And it always looked like crap as far as I'm concerned. It always looked, you might as well have done it with film. I thought it would have looked better.
I'll be right back.
Wade, you said that those cameras that are in the picture behind you, those were Orthicon, not Orthicon, but VidCon cameras?
Yeah, that is a 3 Vidicon camera that was sold in small numbers and briefly, and was used for medical television. And the military also had some at maybe the Pentagon, I'm not sure, but there.
Yeah, I think I've seen the picture of SAC where they were televising maps and stuff. Yeah.
Right. And the RCA equipment book at the time has a few pages on it, and says that the recommended light level is 3,000 foot candles.
Yeah, 1,000-foot candles, F5.6 was the specification on those. I had 2 of them.
Yeah, and I know
there was 2 at Walter Reed Medical Center. I had 2. There was 1 at SAC headquarters in Omaha that was used for looking at a board, and RCA was giving them away. We got the second one, they gave it to us because they couldn't sell them.
Yeah, the exhibit at the museum, as I say, I don't know if they reached 3,000 foot candles, but it was damn bright, and you really couldn't see yourself very well at all when you were standing in front of the backdrop. But I suspect they had the target voltage cranked way up because the lag was terrible. You would step in front of that palm leaf and it would be like you were semi-transparent for a couple of seconds until the image faded away.
Oh, good. Just like a Trinicon in low light.
Yeah. But that was the second exhibit. The first one was a black and white TV exhibit that really got me interested in television engineering as a boy.
Yeah, Matt, this is a down convert that I did probably 20 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, the Snell and Wilcox gear was always top notch.
Just flaky stuff, because getting documentation on it was impossible.
Yeah, and well, some of that stuff is kind of rare because I've seen,
Yeah,
like, for the D2s, the
Yep.
converter that would convert composite SDI to component SDI.
yeah,
I
that,
think,
yeah,
I think they made about 2 of those.
yeah.
And explaining composite SDI to people who've never heard of it, because to them SDI is SDI is SDI. It lasted like 3 weeks.
Yeah. I've got a bunch of 28s. They work fine, no problem with them. It was an idea that was designed to replace these machines with something that was digital and that would plug in. You could just unplug these, roll them out,
Yeah.
and plug in a DVR 28.
Oh yeah,
I mean, ABC was full of them. The whole network. They were everywhere you turn. They must have bought 150 of them.
Yeah, I use 20s and 28s almost, yeah, at least twice a week at work. So
Yeah,
and they hold up really well and they handle tape
yeah,
nicely.
yeah.
I mean,
They're much simpler than the component version. Yeah.
oh, that 2100, that's their last one, and that's
Yep.
still a nightmare to work on.
Well, it's got dynamic tracking, and that I'm sure has something to do with it.
Yeah, it's a little more complex, and it'll easily switch between 525 and 625 line, because
Right.
and they do handle tape really well. They really
Yeah.
do play back nice. But a 20, man, those are solid machines, those DVR 20s. We have a VPR 300, and that thing is a nightmare and a half.
Yeah. But this thing, I mean, look at this. I mean, what machine will do that? Really? I mean, that's a servo that you can control the tape that accurately. And if you look at that picture up there, that's the Zeus.
Yeah. It's just like what Studar would do with their audio decks. They're just so positioned.
Yep. But I mean, you can't beat this thing. The design of this thing is incredible.
I'm trying to get a few in at work just because, although I like the Sonys, I'd like something different, because sometimes one machine will play a tape that another won't.
I've never had a tape come in that these machines wouldn't play.
Yeah, it's pretty rare. 1HC is a very robust format. It's hard to even see dropouts.
Yeah.
It's much better. U-matic, on the other hand.
Well,
U-matic got used for a lot of things it shouldn't have been used for, just like VHS
well,
used.
When Sony brought out the format, they had an open house in New York City on a really cold, windy, wet night. They had a showroom on Fifth Avenue. So they invited all the video guys in the area to come over, and they got a good turnout. And they had a VP 1000 with a plexiglass cover, kind of like what Julian was talking about with his Magnavox thing. But this they were showing it there, and the Sony executives were running around stirring up the crowd, going, "What do you think? Home machine, home machine." Everybody's going to want this in their house. And, we're looking at each other going, who's going to buy this, And it was only 1 hour. And that was the same problem that Betamax had. They built it to do 1 hour. But, and then the VP6, the 1600, which was the recorder, they it had a tuner in it, and it was AGC on the audio. I'm like, where's the volume control? How do we set the audio level? Oh, you don't. It's automatic. No. So it would pump. So every time there'd be you record on the thing and people would stop talking, the audio level would go up to the ceiling. It's just terrible. So 6 months later, they came out with the 1800, which they fixed that. They got rid of the tuner and they put a couple of sliders on it for the audio. But I couldn't believe it, thinking that they were that format was built for the home. And that's what, what they intended it to be.
Yeah, the AGC on the audio, I get that with the EIAJ transfers, because usually you just left it in auto mode, and some of them are interesting because it's been takeoffs of jets, so it
oh yeah but I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, when there's there should have been some kind of a gate that said if the audio level drops down to like below 30 dB, then freeze the level. Don't start pumping it up. And that's that. But then
John,
of course,
I'm sorry, what's the make and model of the machine you have playing now?
Oh, this is an Ampex VPR3.
The VPR3.
Right. It's kind of their glory machine for C format. And
yeah, Joe, and a lot of people have said that the 3 is the ultimate analog VTR.
Yeah.
A lot of, and that, or the IVC 9000. Some people say that, but who's seen as IVC 9000? About 5 people.
It's a one-off machine, and nobody ever used it.
These were in lots of places.
Yeah,
a lot of the big editing houses loved them.
Yeah, all the editing houses had this machine, and lots of them. I mean, we probably there's a few bricks in this building that were paid for by us selling VPR3s. These things just rolled out of here like ADOs. It was another thing that people couldn't get enough of them.
What year did that machine come out?
This thing?
Yes.
Oh boy, let me think. Maybe I think 82, 83. And then they had it. It was around beyond 1990. I know that. So I think it had a 10-year life. And again, what killed all these machines was cartridges, cassette decks, and especially Betacam. Betacam came out. That was it. Everybody said, it's over, because they made a lot of smart decisions with Betacam format, and even more so with SP. I mean, it's a component format, records components. The tape, the other thing that they did that was very clever was, and this is something that Sony's done throughout their entire existence, is all of their cassette machines are very capable of playing back older formats. That's a wonderful thing that they did.
Oh yes.
You could play a original Betacam BBW10 tape in any of the modern machines. They'll all play it. Where Panasonic, on the other hand, every time they come out with a new format, that was it. It was a new format. So I mean, I've got an M machine, and the M2 won't play it. Just John, different format.
Do you know anyone who has a service manual for an MCAM machine?
Nope. Good question.
Because we have one I'm trying to get working. I can't get the darn thing to come out of the processor won't come out of reset.
Well, I'm trying to think. That machine was sold by Ampex and RCA.
I've tried. I've been looking for like 15 years, and I can't find a manual for that thing. And
not many of those were sold either.
Not many of them were sold, but our one client someone was running around with it was a Hawkeye camera.
Yeah, that's right.
Shooting important stuff. And they're like, oh, we want that. That's got important people on it. It's like, ah, crap.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah. No, that's somebody walked in here. Somebody walked in here years ago and dumped one of those M machines in the lobby, and it was the kind with the vertical, where the tape goes in vertically.
Yeah, yeah.
And said, "Here, you'll probably want this." And I don't even remember who it was, and it was somebody I didn't know. And he walked in, walked out. There were low labels on the thing. Plugged it in. It uses standard VHS tape, and it worked fine. So I closed it up, put it in storage.
Do you have any VPR6s?
Yeah, there's two of them. I'm sorry I didn't set them up. They're over in the corner, and they're kind of buried in this building. They work fine. The 6 is a good machine. The 80 was a piece of junk.
And the 80 was rebadged by a couple companies. GE sold them.
Yeah, it's a terrible machine. I don't know why they even made it. It just was. I know they were trying to go for a certain cost.
It was a cheap machine. I had a couple of them, and it worked, but it was cheap.
Yeah. Well, the 6s were pretty good. We put a lot of 6s in, and never had a complaint. We had them in WOR, WPIX in New York, and everybody was happy with them.
Many years
ago, it wasn't as good as the 3, but it was okay.
Many years ago, there was a tape duplicating place up there in, I think, Philadelphia. I don't know how he found me or if I found him. I still don't remember to this day. And he worked late at night. He worked the midnight shift, just duping tapes up there. And he had a TK11 RCA camera that he said he rescued out of the trash. And anyway, which I still have to this day. And while cleaning it, it has a WOR property tag on the inside.
Yeah, that was their first cameras.
One of their early ones, which I still have. But this guy, we were talking about his videotapes and stuff like that up there. Do you have any idea who that could have been up there in Philadelphia at nighttime where they dupe tapes up there for whatever?
Well, there was a couple of post facilities there. I'm trying to remember that. I know those guys. One of them's still around, and he does transfers. He does stuff, inner format stuff. But boy, I'll have to think about that. But Philly had a lot of stuff going on.
Apparently, WOR sold it or something. It used it at a racetrack there in Pennsylvania somewhere.
Yeah, it's possible.
They've stopped using it, but he said he couldn't bear to see it thrown away. And anyway, a friend of mine had relatives up around there, and he went up there and picked it up for me. And it's just kind of interesting that I found that property tag in it.
Yeah, that's OR dumped a lot of stuff. We designed their facility when they were forced to move out of New York into New Jersey. We did all the technical design work for that new plant. And they had GE 350 cameras.
I have some of those.
Yeah, they were a GE company. They had GE transmitters all the way up until they moved to the World Trade Center. Then they went into they bought Pi, or Philips was branding them, went to Philips transmitters. But they were a heavy duty GE outfit. The facility in New York City had GE Master Control, GE Audio. I mean, amazing stuff. And it all got junked. And the other thing, I remember seeing it when they came over to New Jersey. They brought over a pair of TRT-1s or TRT-2s. No, TRT-1s. The same one that George restored up in Woonsocket. And they were sitting in the corner, and Ken McGowan, who was the chief, had bought a bunch of these VPR-3s. He bought 8 of them. And he says, "Hey, do you want those RCA quads?" And I'm like, "Nah, what am I going to do with that stuff?" So it all went in the dumpster. And boy, I sure wish I had one of them today.
Don't we all have stories like that?
Yeah.
Watch them destroy them. They have a recycling center here in Knoxville. I walked in there one day and they had some of those Sony, those BVP 1100s or whatever.
Yeah.
There's Mexicans back there tearing them apart for the aluminum in them.
Oh. Wow.
I just got there too late. I have a TK-41 camera that has a NASA property tag in it. They had four of them. They used them for weather reports for the Air Force. And I learned that something like that, but one day cleaning it, I found a property tag on the bottom of it from NASA. I love history and that stuff. Well, folks, it's getting kind of late and I've got to go to church tomorrow and stuff. And we've had a miserable rainy day here all day. And I've got to empty my car because I have to go to the VA hospital on Monday and need to go up with an empty car up there because it is just packed to the max with electronic stuff I've picked up in the last couple of days. But anyway, it's been a pleasant chat here with you guys here tonight. And I hope to see you at the ETF this year. And I plan on being there. And I'll bring our TK1 and the tube up here, see what we can come up with. I sure would like to know.
Well, Matt's the guy for that.
I look forward to it. Well, guys, you have a blessed evening and a wonderful tomorrow, and I will be in touch. And thanks for everything tonight. You've been a wealth of information. And
Hey, Julian.
Anyway, you guys take care. Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night, Julian.
Good night. It's getting
I
late.
think it's late for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Same thing here.
Good night, folks.